blocked off.
Do you mean by
it's
car?
Almost like, yes, by car. I'm a
Yeah.
cyclist. I'm a cyclist. I watch what it's doing to people, seeing people sitting in traffic jams for really, really massive traffic jams that just weren't there before because you have to go around.
Cruel?
No, it's quite lovely. I mean, 2 points here. First of all, we are in the midst of a climate crisis, and these are small measures that are designed, yes, to some extent, to encourage people to use their bicycles and walk rather than cars, particularly for short journeys where that is perfectly possible. But secondly of all, I think Niall is failing to understand the history of urban areas. Essentially, the roads that we live in, most of them are residential. They are not meant for vast amounts of through traffic. In fact, I am talking at the moment from my house, which is on a low traffic neighbourhood, which has been a low traffic neighbourhood for 30 or 40 years. If it wasn't blocked off at one end, it would be a shortcut between Tufnell Park and Camden Town, and it would have hundreds of cars running around it. So what these measures are, and I accept that some of them might have been imposed a little bit too quickly or not quite correctly designed, but that can be ameliorated over time. But they are introduced within a context of trying to improve air quality, trying to traffic, and trying to make people's lives better. It's been shown that people who live in streets where there is not much traffic are more likely to know each other, they're more likely to have friendly neighbourhoods, they're more likely to communicate with each other. That is a fact that stretches back to research in San Francisco 50, 60 years ago.
And Niall, what's wrong with trying to get people out of their cars and onto their feet or their cycles?
I cycle. I've got no problem with that. I've got no problem with improving for people. That's not what they're doing. They're deliberately taking away people's choices. I grew up without a car. My parents couldn't afford a car. And as I understand it, it's only very recently that working class people over recent years have been able to afford cars and foreign holidays. And it seems to me that what they're doing is really trying to take those things away from us. And I think there's an element of class snobbery about it, that the middle classes have fallen out of love with the car. So they want to take our cars away from us now as well. And it's up to us. They don't trust people to make choices. The group was started by young carers and young mothers who have to make choices. They have to make their own choices. People like Christian and politicians like, our Mayor of Hackney just do not trust people to make the right choices. They brand them as irresponsible, as rat runners. It's a little culture war. They declared war on people, saying, we will make the choices for you. We know what's good for you. Do as you're told. And it's just not on.
So, Christian, do you agree with that? So Niall's saying here it's almost like a culture war. People are being told you basically cannot use your car.
No, the opponents have been pushing this as a culture war. It's nothing to do with being a culture war. I mean, Niall is talking about choice. Well, I'll tell you what is a choice. A choice is kids being able to cycle to school at the age of 10 or 9 or 10 as they do in Holland. It's people being able to walk around their streets without fear of being run over by cars running at 30 miles an hour. The choice at the moment is very constrained for people because of the intense use of cars. And that's got worse. Niall hasn't recognised this. That's got worse because of sat-navs. So 10 years ago, many of the residential streets that are now being turned into LTNs would not have needed to be turned into LTNs because people didn't have sat-navs and weren't kind of told to go down these kind of often narrow residential streets. Now, with sat-navs, what has happened is that many of these streets that were peaceful before have become crowded with people driving through very fast in their cars. And this is what that has stimulated the fact that we need these LTNs.
Answer to you. What are you trying to achieve with your protests?
I think it's a democratic issue, and I think we need to get the road closures removed.
So you want no...
the LTNs from the last year, yeah. There were consultations and, those things should be adhered to. You can't just impose things on people like that. It's having a huge and terrible impact on
So if they gave you notice, would you be happier with them?
No.
So you don't want them. So in respect, you just don't want them. So it doesn't
No, I
matter if they
think
give you
people should
notice
be allowed
or
to
they
make
don't.
choices about whether car usage has actually been going down for 20 years. You know, the problem is solving itself. Cars are becoming less polluted. Fewer car owners. We have more deliveries and more Amazon and things like that. So the problem solving itself, it's a war on people, and it's a culture war on people.
Right, okay, well, very strong views there. That's Niall Crawley. Christian Warmer, thank you very much, both of you, for your time. Now, as I've said, these low traffic neighbourhoods, this is not just a London thing, this is right across the UK. Do you have one near you? I mean, let's just take a quick look at the protest that we saw. This is... this is the protest, the low traffic neighbourhood at the weekend, and yeah, these guys agree with it in their neighbourhoods. So I want to know from you: do you have a low traffic neighbourhood where you live? Do you like it? Is it something that you dislike? Do you think there's a war on cars? Ollie, you're still with me. What's your thoughts?
Well, Christian's a respected transport journalist. I get he's an expert in that space, but I don't know which streets in London he's been witnessing recently, because you can't drive down most streets under anything more than 20 miles an hour because this is potted with all sorts of speed restrictions. My feeling on this is I totally agree with Niall. The way that this has come about has been so sudden and without consultation. It does feel slightly anti-democratic. And my experience of them so far, though not as great as your two guests before, is that it's naked NIMBYism. And it's people who are
NIMBYism,
who are quite well organised, generally middle class, who have been able to arrange their lives in a way that they don't need a car. And that's fine for them. But as Niall was saying, there are still a lot of people who need to get to work in a car, whether it's London or anywhere else in the country. Until public transport is better, that is always going to be the case. And then the final point I'd make, I've got an electric car. I'm not allowed to drive.
Have you?
I'm not allowed
that must
to
mean
drive
you're very posh then.
I'm just looking after the environment, Michelle. I care.
Very good, very good. Well, let me know what you think. Coming up in the next hour on GB News, Colin Brazier will be taking a look at the future challenges for the new Home Secretary. Goodness me, how long's he got? Also, coming up next, do you tip your waiters? And if you do, I bet you want the tips to go to the waiter and not to the bosses. One MP is trying to make sure exactly that happens, and he will be joining me after the break. Don't go away.
The Sainsbury's quality you expect is now price matched to Aldi. King prawns for £1.67. And Italian-made spaghetti for 40p. Find hundreds of Sainsbury's products now price matched to Aldi.
Sometimes it's nice to own something real that you can hold in your hand and one day pass on to your loved ones. This free guide from Direct Bullion told me everything I needed to know so I could start my own collection of gold coins and bullion bars. For your free Direct Bullion guide to buying gold, call 0800 055 7050. One of the things I like about Direct Bullion is you can start your collection for as little as £50. All the gold they sell is VAT free. Their specialists are on hand to guide and support their customers. And if the time comes, Direct Bullion will even buy your gold back. That's why they're a top recommended precious metals dealer by the Spears 500. For your free Direct Bullion guide to buying gold, call 0800 055 7050. That's 0800 055 7050. Start your collection today.
Magic family moments deserve the perfect setting. A stylish awning from House is the ideal addition to your outdoor space. Available in a range of colours and finishes, and with the option of integrated lighting and heating, you can enjoy your outdoor space forever. Now that is magic. House awnings, made for life.
With Virgin Media's lightning fast fibre, you can broadband like a boss. With average speeds of over 100 megabits per second. Get your game on now with lightning fast, reliable broadband at just £25 a month for 18 months with a £35 setup fee. Visit virginmedia.com.
Hello there, welcome back. Right, we're going to speak in a second to the founder of a brand new support group for parents who are concerned about children choosing to pursue a gender transition. This is a mother who is working with a new group, and she's told The Telegraph her teenage son was, her words, groomed into taking hormone blockers, and she blames the BBC and schools. All of this, of course, comes after the landmark Keira Bell court ruling, which we covered last week, I think it was, which effectively banned the NHS from giving hormone drugs to teens, and the Mayor forced out a ruling views legal protection. So joining me right now to discuss this, we've got Stella O'Malley, who's a psychotherapist, author and founder of GenSpect, who is joining us from Ireland, and Katie John Wen, a trans person and gender commentator. Let me start with you, if I may. Stella, what is happening here?
Well, the reason that we set up GenSpect was because so many parents were coming to different parent groups all over the world, and they were all saying the same thing, that they were unhappy with the medical treatment that they were receiving and the therapeutic treatment that their children were receiving, because they felt their children were being fast-tracked. And these were generally children who were autistic, had ADHD, had an awful lot of trauma, had been isolated. These were really children with an awful lot of distress. And all the parents who come to our parents' meetings were saying the other issues aren't being addressed. They're not seeing these children in a holistic way. And what they're just seeing is once the word gender comes into the situation, the kids are being told to medically transition and medically transition fast. And because so many different, I work as a facilitator in some of these parent support group meetings, because so many parents were saying the same thing about the same type of child, as in a quirky, awkward, distressed child who's spending an awful lot of time online. It didn't make sense, and we thought we should harness all the voices of all the different parents groups and create one organisation that speaks for those parents who feel they're silenced because they're afraid to speak out, because their children are highly vulnerable and very distressed, and the parents don't feel that they're receiving the most appropriate care that they could get. And they're certainly not receiving depth work. They're receiving a very shallow version of their problem.
Katie, is this something that you recognise, what Stella's just been explaining, that if a child so much as mentions a slight confusion about gender, then they're almost fast-tracked into this pathway in terms of looking at potential transitions? Is that fair? Is that what's happening?
I don't think it's, well, it may be people's perception, but it's not a reality, because there is no such thing as a fast-track within the NHS. It's a 6-year journey, and it's a
ideal car at a budget to suit you. Visit selectcarleasing.co.uk today.
I've always loved Muller Corner, created my own, and filled it with love. It's my way of saying, love you, Mum and Dad. Try my new Muller Corner creations. Peel back and love.
Sometimes it's nice to own something real that you can hold in your hand and one day pass on to your loved ones. This free guide from Direct Bullion told me everything I needed to know so I could start my own collection of gold coins and bullion bars. All the gold they sell is VAT free, and their specialists are on hand to support their customers. For your free Direct Bullion guide to buying gold, call 0800 055 7050.
You know what they say, if you don't ask, you don't get. So go on Sky Q customers, pick up your Sky Remote and say Get Discovery Plus, and get 12 months of Discovery Plus at no extra cost. Get brand new, exclusive, can't see them anywhere else Discovery Plus originals, get unmissable, bingeable box sets, and get jaw-dropping real-life entertainment. But you don't get any hidden costs, and you don't get tied into a rolling contract. Get Discovery Plus for 12 months at no extra cost with Sky Q. Say Get Discovery Plus into your voice remote or visit sky.com/Discovery Plus.
Granny, I ate all my lunch. Can I have a tonic sweet for cream, please?
Now, that's the last one. So if you see a big brother, you share it with him, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Can you see him?
No.
For parents and the children as well. So thank you both very much for your time. As I say, I'm sure this will be an issue that we will continue to come back to in future weeks. Now, restaurants could be prevented from holding back tips intended for their waiting staff if a new private members' bill is passed through Parliament in the coming months. Dean Russell, the Conservative MP, is bringing this forward, and he joins me now. Dean, good evening. Hi, Dean. Tell me, why have you decided to bring this bill?
Well, for me, it's a thing of fairness, really. So if you go to a restaurant or get your hair, undoubtedly end that with a tip, which you would expect would go to the member of staff, or perhaps would be pooled and shared across all the staff, perhaps including those behind the scenes. But some businesses don't actually enable the staff to keep all of that. And some businesses see that as part of the payment for the service. And so the bill effectively is saying that if a tip is given, that tip should be given to the staff, or an agreement needs to be in place to ensure that the staff can share that, and it's all agreed how that would be done. And that makes sure that, tips and gratuities are given to the people that have been given it, that there's a fairness in the process, but also it's a way to help actually people who are expecting that money to come to them, to make sure that they've got the rights to ensure that happens through employment law.
Into bringing this into reality?
Sorry, say that again, sorry.
What's your time frames that you're hoping to get this concluded by?
Oh, so the second reading is in September, and at that point I'll be doing what's called the second reading, which is to sort of talk in more detail about what the bill would include, so the legalities of it, which I'm working through at the moment. But the premise of it really is that the original idea of the TIPS bill, or something around legislation, actually came in through the Conservative Manifesto, and also has been mentioned in the Queen's speech in 2019. So what I'm trying to do is just really urge that we continue to push on this, that we do make it part of the law, and that we make sure that there's a fair system for people who work in that economy. In somewhere like Watford, where I represent, there's a huge hospitality industry here, and that means there's an awful lot of people who work in the hospitality industry. And so I just want to make sure that they're being represented, their voices are being heard, but also that their rights are protected when this hopefully comes in, which I would hope would come in the next year or two, if I'm really fortunate with the campaign and with the bill.
And Dean, some people might say, whilst this is a noble effort, if people are concerned about restaurant staff, etc., getting the money that's intended for them, why don't you just raise the minimum wage and make sure these people are paid more?
No, I hear that, but I think the culture of tipping has been around in this country for many, many years, and you don't say what are you earning before giving someone a tip. So this isn't about saying let's incorporate tips into their wage. Hopefully people will be paid a fair wage, and that's absolutely important. But actually, this isn't about, and there's already laws to say that tips should not contribute to one's wages. This is about the opportunity for when people do give a tip, when they do want to thank someone for their service, when they've gone over and above in many cases, that actually they get something. And really, this is just about making sure that the worker, the employee, has the right to say, actually, that's my money, not for the business to say, actually, that we're going to keep that. And I think putting that in a way that's very fair for everybody, that's absolutely clear, but also protects people's rights, for me, just feels like a very obvious solution to something that increasingly is a challenge. Because one of the problems now is that we're increasingly more of a cashless society. Last, you might have given a note or a few coins at the end of a meal, or after getting your hair cut, or whatever those things where you would tip. But actually, increasingly, that's now happening via credit cards. And I have some concerns about cashless societies, especially for older people. But when you look at it within this context, actually, if you're paying for a tip via credit card, there's no easy way for a member of staff to say, actually, that bit was for me or intended for me. And this law would help sort of close that gap to make sure there's surety and there's fairness in the system.
Question to you. If you do manage to make this basically law, how will you police this basically? How will you make sure that restaurants are doing what they're supposed to?
Well, first of all, I think, I don't want to make businesses and restaurants and so on the bad guy here. Most do follow the guidance. Most of them are fair, and most of them do this already. But for those who don't, the bill itself would be enshrined in employee law. So it would be the employee's right to say, actually, that's my money you've got there. But ultimately, this is about making sure that employees have the right to say, actually, that tip was intended for me or was intended for the employees, to make sure that they can ask for that. And between now and hopefully getting this law in place, I intend to continue lobbying and actually speaking more to businesses. I have a small business ambassador role. And so speaking to businesses to talk about the importance of this, to make sure that they are putting fair practices in place. And hopefully, I'd love it to be that a law isn't needed. I'm not one for putting legislation in for the sake of it, but I think, especially with this point about a cashless society, making sure employees' rights are protected means that those businesses that perhaps aren't doing that, the employees are able to make a fair ask within their rights.
Dean Russell, thank you very much for your time now. Right, let's move on. Let's head over to Batley and Spen, where residents go to the polls very soon to pick their next MP, of course, in just 2 days' time. In just the last few hours, we've had some breaking news there. Local police have released an image of a wanted man who is allegedly linked to an assault on a campaigner in the by-election. We can go now to Kevin Larkin, who's our reporter for the Yorkshire and the Humber. Kevin, good evening.
Good evening, Michelle.
Hello, tell me the latest there.
Yes, so in the last few hours, West Yorkshire Police have released an image of a man they want to speak to in connection with an alleged assault on some Labour activists. Now, this happened on Whitaker Street in Batley at 4:30 yesterday afternoon. Eggs were thrown at them, and then one man was punched and kicked. West Yorkshire Police say he suffered minor injuries. Police have said they're looking for 3 Asian men in hooded tops they want to speak to in connection with this incident. They've released an image of one of the men, and anyone with any information on this is being asked to call 101 or Crime Stoppers on 0800 555 111.
Why is this election it's been quite controversial, hasn't it? Why is that?
Yeah, it's been a very aggressive and divisive election, really. I reached out today to all 16 candidates who were standing here in Batley and Spen to ask them how they'd found the campaign, because obviously, as you said, Michelle, we have heard lots of talk about it being aggressive and divisive. And of the 8 that came back to me, 3 of them said they had experienced some forms of aggression towards their campaigns, and 5 hadn't. I have had some mixed reports. I mean, the big row locally here today has been about dirty tricks in terms of posters, with claims that Labour politicians were taking down posters and replacing them with their own. Now, Labour sources have told me that's an out-and-out lie. It's fake news, they were saying. And it just shows you sort of the heated temperature that is going on here, with lots of dirty tricks and lots of bad feeling. It's been quite an angry campaign, Michelle, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, and I can't talk about Batley and Spen without asking the latest on that school teacher. I'm sure we'll all remember that story, where someone was basically hounded out of their job for some of their teachings. What's the latest there?
Yes, as you say, this teacher who used an image of the Prophet Muhammad in a class at Batley Grammar School back in March, he went into hiding, and an investigation took place, and that concluded on the 26th of May. And they said that additional management guidance and training should be provided to the teacher, and they said the teacher did not use the resource with the intention to cause offence. The trust behind Batley Grammar School have apologised for the distress that was caused. And interestingly, Michelle, the suspension preventing that teacher from going into the classroom and teaching was lifted back in May, but as far as we know, he hasn't yet returned to the classroom.
Yeah, I mean, it's all well and good lifting a suspension, but, you know, the teachers' union hasn't even supported this guy. So, you know, for him to want to go back into his role, I mean, there's huge questions, I would imagine, on his safety. But look, Kevin Larkin, thank you very much for your time. Now, of course, I do have to now provide a list of all the candidates standing in the by-election. This is to do with legal rules, of course. The list is on screen and can also be found on the GB News website. Now, lots of you have been getting in touch with me. Lots of people talking about these LTNs. Glenn says, get rid of them. They damage businesses and they just push traffic onto other people's streets. Nikki says, they are ridiculous. They tried these in our village. It's a terrible plan, just pushes drivers to other areas. Julie says, well, hang on a second, what about ambulances, fire engines and police, etc. can't get where they need to because the streets have been blocked off. Stephen has been in touch about tipping, saying in no other industry are clients and customers expect to bolster the income of a restaurateur's staff. He's saying pay your own staff properly and then let them keep what is additionally tips and gratuity. On the Meghan Markle thing, Lynn has got in touch saying, well done, Oliver Foster. Straight speaking on Meghan and Harry's machine. As you say, the Oprah thing wasn't an interview, it was just a platform. Other people here are commenting on the vaccines. Quite a few people sharing my view in terms of the two-tier system and the concerns there. Quite a few other people agreeing with you and saying that's how it should be. Linda has been in touch saying, I worked in the NHS in admin. A book could be written at the waist by the NHS bean counters and it could be a real opener for the public. Sounds interesting. Linda, if you've got that much content, maybe you should write a book. Let's see whether or not people would read that. Melendra has been in contact saying that she's pleased Matt Hancock has been replaced by the clearly much more libertarian Sajid Javid. Lots of people getting in touch again about the grooming gangs. Someone's been in touch here to say, why do so many people take to the streets to protest absolutely everything? People taking to the streets to campaign against something as serious as that. I tell you, Ollie, you're with me still. These low traffic neighbourhoods are really getting people talking tonight. And you were saying, Ellie, you are a fan.
No, I'm only a few people benefit from them. That's the problem, and they've been imposed on people so quickly.
Oh, so you're not a fan?
No.
Oh, wow.
For me, though,
I must have been asleep for the last 15 minutes because I thought you were saying that you was in favour of them.
It's the naked NIMBYism.
Right.
People who are, generally in quite comfortable neighbourhoods don't want traffic coming down their streets. It's okay for their own cars, though, but other people can't pass through. And so what's happening, as one of your commenters just said, the pollution is being passed on to a different street. Total NIMBYism. Total NIMBYism.
Are you hearing anything?
Right, OK, I will be back tomorrow. Coming up tonight is Colin Brazier at the top of the hour, but first the weather.
Hello again. A fine and clear night to come across the north, but further south there's going to be a lot of cloud around and the potential for one or two further thunderstorms. There's a Met Office yellow warning in place because of this area of low pressure. It's a pretty slow moving area of low pressure, but But where we've seen the sun come out through the afternoon, that's warmed the skies enough to create a few heavy downpours. Not everywhere seeing them, but where we have seen the thunderstorms potentially causing some disruption, some local flooding. They'll fade through the evening, but the chance of further heavy rain returning to the south coast through the early hours. 1 or 2 showers over parts of northern England and Wales, but much of Scotland, Northern Ireland dry and clear, and it will be a cool night in the far north with temperatures well down into single figures. Here a fine day on Tuesday, plenty of sunshine across Scotland, much of northern England brightening up as well, and Northern Ireland too, and eventually north and west Wales cheering up also. But for much of the Midlands, South Wales, quite cloudy, a little bit of showery rain. And again in the far south, there's the risk of some heavy showers. They'll again be very much hit and miss, and many places won't see them and stay dry. And again, the sunshine makes a big difference. Where we see it, 23, 24 is likely. Cooler on the coasts and cooler where it stays cloudy across the south. Still a few showers around here through Tuesday night. And just look at the cloud increasing across eastern areas as we head into Wednesday morning. Bit of drizzle here and there as well. So quite a grey and damp start to Wednesday across eastern England, again with a lot of cloud around, temperatures mostly holding up in double figures or even into the teens. Wednesday then is a bit of an east-west split with much of eastern England rather drab, some showery rain here and there. Elsewhere largely dry and brightening up all the while. Sunny spells across Wales and southwest England may just spark 1 or 2 showers, but again for much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, it will be a fine and sunny day where temperatures again will get over 20 Celsius. Goodbye.
Tonight with me, Colin Brazier, standing in for Andrew Neil. Philandering MPs, if they cheat on their spouses, are they more likely to deceive you, the voter? Also from Kent to Kigali, is the Home Office about to send illegal migrants to Rwanda to await decisions on their asylum applications? And on tonight's Media Watch, which broadcaster is facing demands by staff for stories about trans people to be vetted by activists before broadcast? Hi there. We British loathe hypocrisy, and that's why if Matt Hancock, wherever he is tonight, is calculating how long he has to wait before a return to frontline throwaways calculator, there is no way back. Whatever credit he had with parts of the British electorate is spent and is wholly irrecoverable. By ordering us not to hug our dying grandparents, even as he was groping his mistress, Hancock made dupes of us all. But he deceived one person especially, his presumably soon-to-be ex-wife, Martha, dignified in her silence, at least so far, but deeply wronged nonetheless. Is his infidelity any of our business? We're told nobody wants to return to Victorian prudishness or priggishness. There is no market for John Major's ill-fated back to basics. Indeed, on Friday morning, with the Sun's front page still ricocheting around Whitehall and Hancock yet to resign, one cabinet minister told me we no longer live in a world where private lives are played out in public. On one level, that's true. The days, for instance, when Tory cabinet hopefuls had to pretend to be straight when they were in fact gay are long gone, undeniably a step forward. But is there any value in the idea that character still matters in public life? Are we entitled to ask a simple question? If someone is prepared to cheat on their spouse, cheat on us, the electorate. Marriage is a very public proclamation of faithfulness. Many of us fail the test. Half of marriages end in divorce. A politician who wanted to add stigma to the woe of separation wouldn't get very far. But what about a bishop? Surely, when the Bishop of Manchester spoke to GB News yesterday, he might put the case for forsaking all others.
I'm more worried about the fact he failed to keep the social distancing than I am about the fact that he was a middle-aged bloke having a bit of a fling.
A middle-aged bloke having a fling. It's worth repeating, Christianity is all about forgiveness, but a bit of a fling? Bishops' parishioners feel that way, but then the Anglican hierarchy long stopped listening to them. I can tell you one thing, though. I'm not sure Matt Hancock's children consider their father's fall from grace to be a bit of a fling, nor perhaps in time his electors in West Suffolk, for that matter. That's tonight's Viewpoint. Well, joining us to ponder on some of those points, we have a clergyman and a layman who both feel the established church has lost the plot. Michael Nazir Ali, the former Bishop of Rochester, and joining me here in the studio is Peter Hitchens, the columnist. Bishop Michael, thanks ever so much for joining us. What do you make of... Michael, what do you make of these comments from the Bishop of Manchester? Just a middle-aged man having a fling. Where's the defence of the sacred institution of matrimony?
Yes, well, he wasn't just having a fling. This was an affair that had been going on for some time. There's been no expression of repentance, of saying sorry for what he's done to his wife and to his family. And of course, what he's done to the people as a whole. I mean, we've been following his rules, and he has been blatantly flouting them in his private life. So, where the Bishop of Manchester is concerned, I think any bishop should the first duty is to uphold the sanctity, the seriousness of marriage. That's a bishop's first duty. Then, of course, the possibility of saying sorry and starting again, as you were saying, that's always possible. The need for counseling, perhaps, but not in any way to be seen to be endorsing the breakup of two marriages, which is what is happening now.
Hitchens, what do you make of this? Should we be forgiving, or do we accept that actually marriage is a very public proclamation of fidelity and to be taken seriously?
Well, I think I start from the Christian position that your main job is to reform yourself and to tell yourself off when you do wrong. I'm not going here to get involved in making any comment on anybody else's private life. It's not my business. But I will comment on the Church. And the Church of England, many years ago, in a document called Putting Asunder, which it put out in 1967, pretty much abandoned its central principle. But before then, even about 15 years before then, it had put out a very strong defence of marriage and said, when confronted with the point that staying together costs pain and trouble, no serious activity, no serious moral action in life comes without pain. But oddly enough, 15 years later, it was saying, when people said that a broken marriage meant terrible things, particularly for the children, basically that the freedom of individuals would always cost pain. It had reversed its position. This is not... The Church was responding, alas, as it so often did, to social and cultural pressure. And it had given
Which
up.
on one level is right. Well, it has to move with the times to a degree.
Well, no, you don't have to. And the point is that one of the reasons why the Church of England is now a shadow and scraping of its former self is that it wouldn't stand up for anything. It just gave in. It believed that the 1945 Labour government was the arrival of the kingdom of heaven, and it pretty much stepped aside from trying to tell anybody what was good or bad. And the great nightmare that a society had been created where people no longer had to be good had come about. And that's what we have now. And an awful lot of people feel they're immensely free, but the problem with all freedom is it comes at the expense of somebody else's freedom. And if we were to discuss this at all, and as I say, I don't want to intrude into other people's private lives because I just feel wrong about it. But the problem does arise. The freedom of adults, ever since the great divorce law reforms of the late 60s, has trumped the freedom of children. And the sufferers in all this have been children. In our society, last week we had this great fuss about the supposed white working class, really, to a great extent, the people of England. A great deal of the suffering that's befallen, particularly boys, in poorer households in this country has come from the fact they don't have fathers anymore. And this is why it's important. The individual actions of ministers are one thing, but a society which says fatherhood and lifelong marriage don't matter means suffering children.
Let's go back to Bishop Michael. Michael Nazir Ali, you wrote in The Spectator 5 Kling, as you saw it, the drift towards wokeness of the Church of England. What you didn't mention, but I think I'm right in saying, that back in the early 2000s, you were basically on a short list of 2 to be the next Archbishop of Canterbury. You didn't get the gig, Rowan Williams did. How different would the Church of England have been had you been its boss?
Well, I have no idea, but the point is that the marriage service of the Church of England still retains that commitment to lifelong fidelity, whatever else the Church of England may have done. And I call upon the Church and its clergy, its bishops in particular, to uphold publicly what the church, other than trying to be fashionable. I mean, moving with the times is okay, but we also have to make sure that we live according to the way in which we are made. And as Peter was just saying, faithfulness in marriage is the building block of the family, and the family is the building block of society. If you jeopardize that, then you are really attacking of the whole of society. And Peter is absolutely right that the lack of fathers in some kinds of communities is certainly affecting particularly young men and their future, and we ought to be very concerned about it.
Yeah. I just wonder, Bishop Michael, whether you are prepared to say what, in a sense, Peter Hitchens isn't, that actually marriage is a public proclamation. It's a very public vow. We live in a time where the idea of holding to a vow can sometimes feel a little bit unfashionable.
Could I just say, I'm not prepared to say that. That's a different thing. I'm prepared entirely to support that principle, and I think that one of the things that Christians often have to be in the modern world is more Christian than their own church and their own church leaders. Church leaders have become, and no church is immune from this, bureaucratic, government-obsessed, and increase from what their flock actually want. They're bad shepherds. So if you're serious about this, what I am not interested in doing is making personal condemnations.
No, but I get that. But
it's very different from. I am absolutely prepared to defend the idea of lifelong Christian marriage. It seems to me, and I've written several books in which I've said this, it seems to me to be the absolute foundation of a free and just society.
But Peter, do we have a right? Of course we have a right, but is it correct for us to look at a politician and say, we suspect your character isn't what it could be. You have publicly cheated on your wife. We therefore think that may make you more inclined to deceiving the electorate. Is that fair?
Anybody can say it. I just think that it serves no purpose. There is not one of us who is without sin. And if we go around saying things like that, then most people will turn around and say, well, so what about you?
Yeah.
And it doesn't actually have any good effect. If we're going to discuss this in a way which might have some effect, I think we have to say to people, what's happened to marriage, either in the hands of the state or in the church, is a catastrophe. And it is reversible. And it's quite astonishing that no one has actually tried to reverse it, either in law or in the churches over the past, really, since 1969.
Bishop Michael.
But yes, but you can't. The fact of the matter is, you can't make these statements only in the abstract. I mean, I totally agree with what Peter is saying, but you have to say something about the concrete situation that we are facing. And what we are facing is someone who has systemically fooled all of us, of course, in one way, but also systemically, it seems, if this has been going on over a period, deceived his wife and his family. And the question naturally arises about his character for public office. I mean, it is amazing that all the talk has been about social distancing, that he wasn't socially distanced and so forth at that time. And fair enough, but the fact that here is a family that is being ruined, it is of course possible to mend a marriage. I agree with Peter. All of us go wrong. None of us is perfect. But it is possible for us to say sorry and to start again. That is the basis of Christian faith. Say sorry and start again. There doesn't seem to be any sign of him doing that.
Bishop Michael, just the point, I suppose, is that here was the Bishop of Manchester willing to talk politics rather than condemn infidelity. And I just wonder if that's part of a trend in the Church of England. We had a bishop in Wales who tweeted, "Never trust a Tory." I mean, there's part of me that sort of thinks, thinking back to the days of the Bishop of Durham, that there of, the idea of politics.
I just showed the Bishop of Manchester saying was an extraordinarily casual response, which I don't think us three have had, to an extremely serious matter. The way in which you're serious about it is what's important to me. I think that if you want to be serious about it, then condemning Mr. Hancock and making a public object of him will not get you very far. It will just make a lot of people say, well, many people have failed at this. What I'm saying here is that legislators and members of the church hierarchy and ordinary parish priests have got to start thinking seriously about whether they've let marriage slip too far, because they have. And it's extraordinary that the only steps which are taken in law, supported by major newspapers and so forth recently, have been to make it easier to get divorced. Now, why on earth is it no harder to get divorced in this country if you have children than if you don't? It's a ridiculous situation, but that is how the law stands at the moment. Just kind. But rather than going after some here today, gone tomorrow politician, let's go after the fact that the people who are supposed to be defending marriage haven't been defending it, neither this allegedly Conservative Party nor the Church of England.
Peter Hitchens and Michael Nazir-Ali, thanks both very much. Today, the Prime Minister has faced questions over his handling of the Matt Hancock scandal. Can we call it a scandal? I think we can. Boris Johnson claims he took decisive action, despite initially saying the matter was closed.
I read the story on Friday, and we've got a new health secretary in post on Saturday, and I think that's about the right pace to proceed in a pandemic.
Well, earlier in the Commons, Sajid Javid, he was in here last week, made his debut as Health Secretary. He lauded the work done by Matt Hancock before acknowledging the scale of the task ahead.
Whilst we decided not to bring forward Step 4, we see no reason to go beyond the 19th of July. Because, in truth, no date we choose comes with zero risk for COVID. We know we cannot simply eliminate it. We have to learn to live with it. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, with the numbers heading in the right direction, all while we protect more and more people each day, July the 19th remains our target date.
Well, our political correspondent Tom Harwood is here with me in the studio. There was some suggestion when Sajid Javid got the gig, Tom, that he might try and draw forward the deadline for Freedom Day. He's not done it. But there is a feeling abroad, isn't there, that the Cavaliers have got their man in at the expense of the Puritans. Is that fair?
I think there's certainly a sense of that. However, I would put some caution on that date. You know, the 5th of July being that cut-off date, that break clause moment, the 2-week delay. I think that most Conservative MPs, or at least the ones that I've spoken to in the last couple of days, sort of feel that that was a bit of a sop to them that would never, ever have actually been implemented, just to make sure that there was less of a rebellion over this extension of Freedom Day than otherwise there would have been. But I think certainly there is a sense that within Cabinet, and particularly within those sub-Cabinet meetings that you get between senior ministers who decide this, there is someone who's seen to be not just on the less absolutist side of lockdown, but also more conscious about the economy. Someone who's obviously a former Chancellor, seen as being on the more Thatcherite side of the party, whereas Matt Hancock was obviously more of a Cameroon. I think that there's been a shift there in many directions.
But Tom, this idea that Sajid Javid could, swoop into the Department of Health and with the stroke of a pen suddenly advance the schedule for the Freedom Day arriving, it's absurd. There's a huge amount of institutional inertia that goes with these huge departments, biggest employer, the NHS in Europe, I think I'm right in saying, and the idea he could suddenly, within 24 hours, advance that schedule was clearly wrong-headed.
Yeah, and I don't think that there's a particular impetus to do so, even from Sajid Javid. One of the things he said earlier in the Commons was that 4-week delay will allow 2/3 of adults in this country to have both of their jabs. Now, that's an enormous weapon that we have, as the strategy of the Department of Health has been to move the heavy lifting away from blunt restrictions, which are obviously very, very damaging in so many ways, socially and economically, in favour of jabs that can do the heavy lifting in terms of keeping the disease down. Now, we know that the Delta Indian variant is less effective against one jab, or one jab is less effective against it, I should say, and 2 jabs work so much better. So that time to allow 2/3 of adults to be double jabbed will pay dividends and hopefully make that irreversible roadmap step, because this is the point, and I think this is the deeply political point about this. The government seems to have broad support from the public about going a little bit more slowly down this roadmap. I think where they might lose support, or at least many, many questions will start to be asked of this government, is if they had to go backwards rather than forwards more slowly.
And what about Boris Johnson and Matt Hancock? What did you make of the Prime Minister saying, actually, he was sort of asked to leave?
think that it's quite a stretch to suggest that the Prime Minister acted particularly decisively here. We heard that on Friday the Prime Minister said that the case was closed. The matter was closed, he'd accepted the apology and we're moving on. By Saturday, the Health Secretary was out, and by Sunday, the Prime Minister appeared to be saying, or at least briefing, that that was all his grand plan. You know, the story broke on the Friday and the Health Secretary was gone by the Saturday. But I think it's fair to say this was not a moment of incredible decisiveness from the Prime Minister. This was a moment of, yet again, a lot of pressure being placed on him, a lot of members of Parliament, and eventually that pressure reaching a boiling point.
Almost out of time, Tom. In a word, is there any way back ever for Matt Hancock? There's, you know, politics, a day is a long time, a week is a long time in politics, but the weight of public opprobrium on Matt Hancock just feels so great that the idea of him making a return to frontline politics is unconscionable, isn't it?
Well, I think in the middle of the storm, it's always hard to make predictions like this. I was in his constituency yesterday, and there is very little love for Matt Hancock amongst his own constituents. And even those who seem to have voted for him think it's the right decision for him to have stepped down. The Prime Minister was very clear in his response to his resignation that he hopes to see Matt Hancock back in public life in some form, but I think it's just too early to say whether that will materialise or not.
Tom Harwood, thanks a lot, Tom. After the break, the Danish say they will send illegal migrants to Rwanda to await a decision on their asylum applications. The Home Office likes the idea. We'll talk to Nigel Farage.
Sometimes it's nice to own something real that you can hold in your hand and one day pass on to your loved ones. This free guide from Direct Bullion told me everything I needed to know so I could start my own collection of gold coins and bullion bars. For your free Direct Bullion guide to buying gold, call 0800 055 7050. One of the things I like about Direct Bullion is you can start your collection for as little as £50. All the gold they sell is VAT free. Their specialists are on hand to guide and support their customers. And if the time comes, Direct Bullion will even buy your gold back. That's why they're a top recommended precious metals dealer by the Spears 500. For your free Direct Bullion guide to buying gold, call 0800 055 7050. That's 0800 055 7050. Start your collection today.
At Labara, our SIM-only plans offer 10 gigs of data, unlimited UK minutes and text for just £10 a month. And you can change or cancel anytime. Buy now at labara.co.uk.
Oh.
Friday's Euro Millions can make 20 UK winners' dreams come true. Not that dream, this Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Play on app, online and in-store.
I've always loved Muller Corner. Now I've created my own and filled it with love. It's my way of saying, love you, Mum and Dad. Try my new Muller Corner creations. Peel back and love.
Every year, a think tank in London called Legatum produces a huge doorstep amid a flurry of free drinks for journalists. I've been one of them. The report is called the Prosperity Index, and it rates the quality of life for the citizens of 167 countries. Britain does well, underlining why 5,600 migrants have risked life and limb to get here in small boats so far this year alone. But other countries are stuck near the drop zone of this global label. Rwanda, for instance, is 123rd when it comes to personal safety. Unsurprising, given the recent history of this landlocked African republic, which saw killed in the genocide of the early 1990s. Not a place, then, likely to act as a magnet for the huddled masses. But it is a country which last month signed a memorandum of understanding with Denmark. You can call it up online. 14 legal articles, and this being a Scandinavian country, they're even helpfully written in English. The Danish are, depending on your tastes, following the hardest of hard lines on illegal immigration, or dreaming up imaginative solutions to an intractable problem. The memorandum allows the Danes to assess the validity of asylum claims offshore. Words illegal migrants who make it to Copenhagen might find themselves on planes bound for a processing camp in Kigali, theoretically at least. Something similar was tried by Tony Abbott when he was Australia's Prime Minister. Last week, when I interviewed him on GB News, he summed up his policy with the directness for which he's known. If you come the wrong way, you must not, he said, be allowed to stay. Australia was condemned by human rights groups when it sent migrants to holding centres in Papua New Guinea, but Abbott reasoned that if you made it clear, painfully clear, to would-be asylum seekers that any attempt to enter Oz would end up in a steamy camp hundreds of miles away from Australia, lives would actually be saved as a result, because over time, fewer people would attempt the hazardous journey. Broadly speaking, he was right. Numbers plummeted. And today, The Times reported that Priti Patel has opened talks with the Danes to share their processing operation. It's a measure of her frustration. Talks with France about migrants being processed in safe EU countries have run into the sand. When the idea of using a British territory like Ascension was floated a few months ago, people scoffed. But opinion polls consistently show support for tougher measures. Nobody, however, predicted that a potential solution to the problems of the Kent coast could be found in the heart of Africa. Leader and GB News contributor Nigel Farage joins us now, along with our political correspondent Tom Harwood, who never went away. Nigel Farage, to you first. What do you make of this scheme?
Well, it's a very good day to be asking me this, Colin, because I've been on the Kent coast today. I found a boat abandoned on a stretch of shingle, and I saw the police conducting a manhunt where 20 people who'd landed disappeared. And then later on, I watched the Dungeness lifeboat come in with another group of 20 people. I just missed 45 who'd landed down at Camber Sands on one of the new 11-metre boats that are now being moulded and made. Haven't got the numbers for today in total, at least 200 today. We're headed 1,000 this year. That's my current prediction for the numbers that will come across the English Channel. Now, here's the point about what the Times said today from Priti Patel. We have seen the summer of 2019, our Home Secretary consistently make promise after promise as to how she would stop this problem. You know, we were going to have drones, we were going to have the RAF, we were going to do this, we were going to do that. But the point is, and you referred to Tony Abbott a moment ago. Now, Tony's a good friend of mine. He started off with the offshore processing centres, but in the end he decided even that wasn't the way to solve it. In the end, what Abbott did, the boats were coming from Indonesia, and the Australian Navy put them under tow and towed them back to Indonesia. Nearly every one of these vessels coming into the UK is actually being escorted by the French Navy until it gets across the line into British waters, whereupon Border Force and our magnificent RNLI then act as a taxi service. Can you imagine, once you've accepted people in, and given that despite Brexit, we're still part of the European Convention on Human Rights, there is no legal way we're going to be able to deport people to Rwanda or anywhere else. And once again, it's Priti Patel making promises that she can't deliver, cheering up the backbenchers, getting, a Tory party conference into rapturous applause. And I have to say, Priti Patel on this issue, once again, pretty useless.
Tom, Priti Patel, it seems to some people, is buying time. The truth is, she can't make the French bend to the UK state's will on this. Pursuing, for instance, Nigel Farage's idea of towing boats back across the English Channel to French ports, it's a non-starter.
Crucial context within which we're discussing this. I mean, the UK has been trying to have these negotiations with France, and they don't seem to. The UK government being able to say, well, hang on, if we don't talk to France, we've got friends over here in Denmark who we can talk to, friends even in Rwanda who we can talk to. Perhaps that puts greater pressure on negotiations with France. After all, we know that there's no way you can get a good deal if you're not willing to walk away. That certainly is a lesson over the last few years in British politics and British negotiation. So potentially this is more of a tactic than anything concrete and substantial. But I think there's something else that is being missed here, and that's that, of course, you can say that we're going to stop the boats all you like, but people into this country. It's one of the best countries in the world, and people who are escaping squalor and misery, not only in war zones, but apparently also in northern France, are desperate to come here. So I think that the question is, and Priti Patel did set this out a couple of months ago in when she was trailing her new plan for immigration, is you need more secure legal routes for people to do the right thing, to go through the proper processes and to come here legally and become contributing tax-paying citizens of this country. The problem is if you don't have those legal routes, then people will find other ways to come here. So there's got to be two sides to this coin. Yes, find ways to prevent that treacherous journey and to crack down on those criminal gangs that treat people as commodities, but also open up more for people to do the right thing.
Nigel Farage, let's just talk about the Danish role in all this, because if you look at the Memorandum of Understanding, it's available online, you can have a look at it. It's clearly a fairly substantive piece of work. It's not window dressing, it's not gimmickry. There seems to be a full-throated attempt to process asylum seekers who end up in Denmark in Rwanda, not an obvious place to go, but there it is. Is this a sense in which, you know, climbing on Denmark's bandwagon, but also, and perhaps more importantly, what lessons might there be, for instance, for the Labour Party, when you look at the government in Denmark that's doing this? It's not an obviously traditional Tory government at all. It's of the centre-left, to some degree, a coalition with the Greens of all people, and they like this idea. There's a lesson there, surely, for Labour if they want to reclaim the Northern Heartlands and the Red Wall.
But Labour can't do that because so much of the Labour Party has now become this new sort of international socialist, we're all citizens of the world type party that they just can't make that jump. Look, Denmark has had much tougher immigration policies than almost any other country in Europe for years and years and years. They do not have a serious problem with illegal immigration anyway. And what they're trying to do with this proposal is to say, don't waste your time, don't bother. What we do is I've seen into this country, nearly all young men between the ages of 18 and 26. And Tom Harwood, I'd say this to you. If you make legal immigration easier into Britain, net migration into Britain is now running at nearly 1/3 million every year. The British population has increased by 8 million since the year 2000, and 84% of that is directly down to immigration. We ask ourselves, why is there a housing crisis? Why can't we get kids into primary school? Is through legal migration to Britain. We don't need to make that any easier. But as far as the illegal route is concerned, most of those that come would never qualify legally. Most have no identity documents whatsoever because they have deliberately, willfully thrown them away. They are being put within 24 hours into 4-star hotels up and down the country at a massive cost to this nation, and many will finish up effectively in the modern slave trade. And we should be ashamed that we're allowing this to happen. We have to absolutely tell the French we will no longer accept the French Navy escorting illegal dinghies out of their waters into ours. We are no longer a member of the Euro. We'll respect the 1951 Geneva Convention on refugee status, which says you claim that status in the first safe country you come to. So we can deal with the illegal stuff, actually very simply. When it comes to legal migration, let's have a bigger debate about whether our quality of life is better with at least 8 million more people living here in the last 20 years than it was before.
Tom, that's a debate for another time, in a sense, isn't it? But just, I could see you gingerly shaking your head at one point. You can explain why, perhaps. But there's a case, and I know we were talking about it off air, that there are those people who say, look, actually, in a globalised world, what's wrong with open borders?
Well, I suppose there is one view which is philosophically more consistent, I suppose, than a great popular view in this country that used to be have open borders to 27 European countries but very tight migration controls on the rest of the world. Surely if you're going to have open borders to 27 countries, it's actually fairly discriminatory to not have the same policy to every country in the world. And I think that there is certainly a case, it's not the one that I would necessarily make, that you should have borders order attitude and deliver that complete open flow with no restrictions on people whatsoever. But what I would say with regard to illegal migrants that are costing this country an inordinate amount of money, and indeed refugees being put up in hotels, or asylum seekers I should say, being put up in hotels, and also statutorily banned from working in this country. Surely the answer there is to create more legal routes for them to become tax-paying, contributing members of society who actually put cash in rather than take cash out. That seems to be a far more sensible way to go about this. And just as for the population size problems, I mean, the United Kingdom's population before the 1800s was about a third that of France. We had the Industrial Revolution. We overtook France in terms of our population. That made us the premier power in the world. Well, that delivered such prosperity for our country, and we can deal. We will be much better to face the problems of the future by having a large, stronger population.
Now you're taking the long view. We're getting into graphic waters here. Nigel Farage, the last word to you.
These are not refugees. They're not asylum seekers, Tom. They are illegal immigrants into this country. 85% of them are young men between the ages of 18 and 28 who've deserted their home countries. They're not refugees. They are economic migrants pursuing an economic dream. They've deserted their families from their home countries, and many of them will finish up as slaves or working in crime in Britain. We should be ashamed of what we're doing, and let's call it what it is. And frankly, on your last point, you know, the reason that wages have gone down, the reason you can't get your kids into local schools, the reason that NHS waiting lists are what they are, that traffic is what it is that our population has officially risen by 8 million so far since 2020. And the truth is, it's probably more than 10 million. This is about quality of life, and a rise in population as rapid as that due to immigration, frankly, is the political class betraying ordinary people, and so few in London are prepared to call it out.
This is a Malthusian argument. We've had this discussion. The population increases from 1800 to the mid-20th century created enormous wealth and enormous success for this country, and quality of life.
This is not creating wealth.
Gentlemen,
GDP's gone up, but GDP per capita has gone down, and the quality of life cannot be measured in purely economic terms. And that point is why we voted for Brexit in 2016.
But when we start getting into Thomas Malthus, we know we've gone too far. Our brief is purely to talk about Rwanda. Nigel Farage, Tom Harwood, absolute pleasure as always. Thanks very much, Steve, for your time. After the break, what's it like being a teacher in the age of woke, with pupils who feel they know better and aren't afraid of denouncing anyone they suspect of microaggressions?
You know what they say, if you don't ask, you don't get. So go on Sky Q customers, pick up your Sky remote and say get Discovery Plus, and get 12 months of Discovery Plus at no extra cost. Get brand new, exclusive, can't see them anywhere else Discovery Plus originals, get unmissable, bingeable box sets, and get jaw-dropping real-life entertainment. But you don't get any hidden costs, and you don't get tied into a rolling contract. Get Discovery Plus for 12 months at no extra cost with Sky Q. Say get Discovery Plus into your voice remote or visit sky.com/Discovery Plus.
The Sainsbury's quality you expect is now price matched to Aldi. Fresh, juicy strawberries for just £1.10. And thick double cream from British Farmers for 85p. Find hundreds of Sainsbury's products now price matched to Aldi.
From falling in love and finding a home, to spending your time making it your own. Perhaps it's just you and your four-legged friend, or maybe you have your savings to spend. A man about town with an apartment in mind, or simply looking for a bigger find. Find out how we can help you along life's journey. With access to all lenders, Flagstone can support you in getting the best mortgage deal to suit your personal needs. Why not give us a call or visit flagstone.co.uk. Your home may be repossessed if you do not keep up repayments on your mortgage.
This summer, Media is dropping mobile deals like it's hot. Drop it like it's hot. Check out our summer deals drop at virginmedia.com.
When we all play the National Lottery a little, fun stuff happens. Like keeping our beaches clean and safe for everyone.
Past and the present and the future.
Bringing history to life.
The heart and the brain and the body.
funding museums for all to enjoy, supporting inspiring music programmes, and helping people explore the great outdoors. £30 million a week to good causes. The National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
Welcome back. It's time for Media Watch. Now, earlier this month, the BBC Today programme ran an item about the LGBT charity Stonewall. In particular, its controversial Diversity Champions training scheme for employers. Perhaps you've heard of it. Public bodies, from government departments to police forces, pay thousands of pounds for advice on gender-neutral spaces, on pronouns and trans inclusion. They get the equivalent of a gold star from Stonewall if they get things right. Problem is, a growing number of organisations are beginning to question if Stonewall is offering value for taxpayers' money and, more importantly, whether they've ignored the rights of feminists, women who hold gender-critical views. In other words, that being a woman is a biological fact. All this you may know. What you might not have heard was a debate on Radio 4 earlier this month. The producers had asked Stonewall to put up a representative. They didn't. Two gay contributors did make it, however. One upbraided the BBC presenter Justin Webb for not inviting a trans spokesperson to take part. Webb gave as good as he got, pointing out that his sexual preferences were a private matter, and he'd appreciate an answer to his original question. Thanks very much. These spats happen. They often make for quite engaging and sometimes instructive broadcasting. But what happened next is new and chilling, and you ought to take notice. Members of the BBC's Pride Board, which includes LGBT staff, met and decided activists should have a right to vet transgender news stories before they are broadcast. Deciding what should or shouldn't be said by journalists is a booming industry right now in China, but not normally in SW1. Further back, history is littered with religious sects who felt they, and only they, had alighted on the truth of something hitherto occluded. Insisting that only those who've experienced something can say anything about it is asinine. Journalism in the Western tradition at its best attempts to give everyone a voice. If staff at the BBC want to lobby and pressurise programme editors and presenters, perhaps they'd be better off doing it from outside the comforting embrace of the BBC licence fee. Well, Free Speech Nation presenter Andrew Doyle is here to think and ponder on that one. I come at this from the journalistic point of view, I suppose. Don't like the idea of caucuses within newsrooms telling me what to write. You probably see it a little bit differently, I guess.
No, I mean, I understand the point that when activists have a say in how journalism should run and what sort of questions should be asked, that is a problem because they're coming from a particular ideological slant. It's interesting that they invoke the idea of identity. It just goes to show how far identity politics has gone. But the trouble is that whenever someone takes that line and says, well, you don't have a right to have an opinion on this unless you're a member of the LGBT community, well, it will be perfectly easy to find someone of the LGBT community who has that opinion. And what do you do with your argument then? You're scuppered, aren't you? So I think identity politics, when it comes to argumentation, is a dead end. But that aside, the idea that activists within the BBC are saying that they should be able to vet certain elements of program. In other words, they should have some kind of editorial control over what goes on. That is a very bad idea because it's the kind of ideas that those activists themselves are promoting are the very ideas we need to scrutinise. And part of the problem with this movement at the moment, what we would call, I suppose, the woke movement, but in particular in relation to this story, those who advocate for the gender identity ideology, is that part of their strategy is to say that this is not up for debate.
It's settled. It's a settled topic. We've decided that it's definitive and can't be changed.
Exactly. So it's not like the question of gay marriage, which we had decades of protest and debate and persuasion, and we came to a resolution, and now the vast majority of people agree that...
and by the way, it's still possible to hold a contrary view.
And it still is possible, exactly. Even within that, it's perfectly legitimate to hold...
there are gay men who don't agree with gay marriage. I mean, that's still legitimate, you know.
There are indeed. But in this case, this is most certainly not a settled matter because no conversation has been allowed. I think that Stonewall, as we've seen, has got itself into hot water again and again. And one of their main problems is this refusal to debate. You know, when Matthew Parris, for instance, one of the co-founders of Stonewall, wrote an article critiquing its current trajectory, the Stonewall official Twitter account posted an image of the article and wrote, "You okay, hun?" which is a kind of teenage, snarky, dismissive comment. Now, when they keep doing things like that, when the head of Stonewall is likening gender-critical feminists to anti-Semites, what this does is it sends a message that they're not interested in people's concerns, not interested in people's criticisms. And people, the people who are running Stonewall presently, along with many of their supporters in the commentariat, tend to be interpreting any criticism or concern or question as evidence of hatred and transphobia. That is simply delusional. There might be, I know there are some transphobes out there are some hateful people who might be piping up at this time. The vast majority, the very idea that someone like Matthew Parris is a transphobe is so palpably absurd. It's also libelous, frankly.
Well, and also the idea that you want a thoughtful, considered voice like Matthew Parris to be silenced or curbed in some way is anathema to people who are interested in free expression. Just hold that thought for a second, because the BBC, we've asked for the BBC to give us a statement. They've given us one. Let me read it to you. They said, BBC News has full editorial independence and the meetings of staff networks do not determine editorial decisions. So that's fairly clear. Is there something in the nature, I wonder, Andrew, of the way the BBC works, is funded? You know, because of the licence fee, it's different from a newspaper. If you're in a newspaper, let's say I go and work for the Guardian, I toe the Guardian line, otherwise I don't get paid. Ditto the Telegraph or the Sun. At the BBC, because funding is guaranteed on pain of criminal prosecution, you can then get these caucuses and groups within the institution who are then free to lobby and pressurise for the agenda they so feel fit to pressurise for.
Yes, and one of the problems is, because the national broadcaster obviously has to maintain political impartiality, when it comes to these kinds of ideas, they do not perceive themselves, they think they're on the right side of history, they think that all of the stuff you've said is settled, but actually it does violate impartiality if you're pushing a particular side of this debate. Actually, there's a big conversation that needs to be had. With the BBC, as with many institutions, it doesn't take many from the sort of critical social justice ideology to get in for the whole institution to be dominated by it. And part of the reason for that is the tactics are often intimidatory. It's often a kind of bullying. I mean, if you're in the BBC at the moment and you're thinking, I've got some reservations about gender identity ideology, you're very unlikely to speak up. And I know this because I've spoken to people involved. You would be because you might jeopardise your career prospects. It's not just the BBC, and it's unfair to just say it's them. This is in any institution where you have this contingent of activists present, and this is the problem: is that to argue against them, you have to argue against anyone. You have to have someone who is willing to argue, not someone who's just going to call you names and tell you that you're hateful and shut you down.
Yeah, and putting your head above the parapet, not just something restricted to the BBC, is it? There are other broadcasters maybe who feel that way as well. Andrew Doyle, hang around, we'll talk to you in a bit. Coming up, who's turned 50 today and might have a reasonable claim to be the most remarkable person on earth right now. Before that, it's Woke Watch. And not always easy being a teacher. Just ask our own Andrew Doyle, who was one. The holidays are good, but during term time there is a mountain of homework to mark. It takes charisma to maintain class discipline and an engaging manner to counter rival distractions, not least from the ubiquitous smartphone. And according to the headmaster of one top private school, teachers are now, quote, incredibly anxious about being denounced by their pupils. It's not quite the killing fields of Cambodia with Khmer Rouge kids sniffing out enemies of the revolution, but there is a whiff of year zero nonetheless. These are pupils who are increasingly aware that they can land a teacher they dislike in hot water. Nicholas Hewlett, headmaster of St Dunstan's College in southeast London, said teachers see a, quote, righteous generation of children looking for their teachers to trip up, who are looking for microaggressions. Mr Hewlett is not alone. Last week, the Chief Inspector of Schools, Amanda Spielman, warned about a new wave of activism in schools, with self-appointed moral guardians challenging the traditional balance of authority between those who are taught and those who teach. Andrew Doyle is still here. He's no longer a teacher.
No.
Is that relevant?
Oh, well, only insofar as when I left teaching, which is a number of years ago now, I'd reached the point where I thought I wouldn't advise anyone to go into this career now. It's kind of perilous because children have always lied to get their teachers into trouble, you know, and we've all been children, so we know that as a child you will lie out of trouble no matter what happens. Now, the teachers' unions have always had this trouble with false allegations because the vast majority of allegations against teachers turn out to be false.
And the process works against a teacher, and sometimes the kids know that, don't they? Make the allegation, the teacher suspended suspended.
Yeah,
no
well,
evidence needed at that stage.
For child protection purposes, the teacher has to be suspended straight away pending investigation. The children know this. It gives them an incredible amount of power. Now, that's not to say that, you know, there are incidents where teachers do abuse their power and do behave incredibly badly and often criminally, right? And those things have to be taken seriously. So I sympathise with the schools having to take the allegations seriously. But where the unions struggle is that, of course, it gives a lot of power to millions coming from children who want to get out of trouble. Now, by suggesting that we're going to give a list of microaggressions to children and say that you should complain about these, you're just making the problem a whole lot worse. People might not know what microaggressions are.
So here's your moment.
Okay, well, the idea is that it's when you say something inadvertently offensive, okay? So, for instance, you sneeze and I say, God bless you. That might be offensive if you're an atheist and you don't believe in God, right? That would be an example of a microaggression.
Might be offensive if you see the contents of my handkerchief.
That would be terribly offensive. Exactly. You should keep that to yourself under all circumstances. But other things like if you were to say, where are you from, to a person of colour, that kind of thing. So,
and what about this about raising eyebrows?
Oh, well, the raising eyebrows thing came about in May. That was at Cambridge University, where the university published a list of potential microaggressions and actually invited staff and students to report on people for them. And they weren't limiting it to language. They extended it to body language. So raising eyebrows at a person of colour was considered perhaps a racial microaggression, along with the linguistic things like calling a woman girl and things like that. Now, of course, the thing about this is the phrase microaggression gets it wrong because if it is inadvertent, it's perfectly possible, by the way, to inadvertently cause offence by being thoughtless with your language. No one's denying that.
That's one of the oldest parts of the human story, isn't it? We're offensive without realising all the time.
Well, of course, but the best way to handle that is to say, look, could we have a conversation about that troubled me a bit or whatever, not to report someone Stasi style to the authorities and get them punished for it. And so I worry about this because it's not actually aggressive. If it is inadvertent, then by definition it's not aggressive. So I think this is a problem. But also this inviting people to police people's body language is bound to end in tears. If you go back to even April 2017, in fact, at Oxford University, they published a list. I think it was a newsletter of microaggressions, similarly inviting people to complain. But one of them was avoiding eye contact. That was seen as a microaggression. They had to apologise and backtrack, and of course it was because autistic people often find it difficult to maintain eye contact. So the reason they backtracked was because this was considered ableist. So, you know, I mean, they're bound to get themselves into trouble with this, trying to interpret each other's body language. In fact, I don't know if you remember this, at Sheffield University, this was, I think it was last year, the university was paying students £9.34 an hour to spy on their peers and to report any microaggressions, and they were openly inviting this. This, of course, is wide open to exploitation. Anyone who wants to settle a score, this is how you're going to do it. But also, you're going to start noticing offence where it's not there.
And Andrew, there's no linkage at all between the, in quotes, offence and the punishment. You know, it can be just a malicious complaint by a pupil, ends up with teacher being suspended, ends up with teacher's record being, you know, marked, and that follows through the magic of Google for the remainder of his or her career. So there's no connection. Now, ordinarily, when justice is served, there's a process that we rely on that's been refined for hundreds of years, from the common law all the way through. This is just something that's been dreamed up on a campus in America, and now we bought it, hook, line and sinker.
It's very damaging because what a lot of people don't realise is that the process in of itself is a form of punishment, you know? Now, I spoke...
Lisa Keogh, you're going to mention...
Yes, I am going to mention Lisa
I wondered if you would.
I interviewed Lisa Keogh on my show on Saturday. Now, she's a young woman who was a student at Abertay University in Dundee. In Dundee. And she was punished because she said in a seminar that women have vaginas. Women are born with vaginas, and that women tend to be the weakest, as in men tend to be stronger physically than women. These are not controversial statements because they happen to be true. She went through a disciplinary investigation after complaints were made by people who were anonymous, that she didn't know who they were. And she said she's been through hell. It's been really traumatic. And she won't even go to her graduation now because she just feels so distant. She was not supported by anyone, by staff members, by the university itself. It's a really awful situation. And I think we need to remind ourselves again and again that the investigation process is punitive, it is stressful, and it is often enacted as a form of revenge.
And, as you say, the process itself can be a form of punishment. Andrew, as ever, thanks very much indeed. Thanks a lot. Who is the most remarkable human being on the planet right now? With 7.6 billion of us to choose from, it's a wide open field. Maybe you'd plump for your favourite author, actor, sports star. Perhaps you'd stay closer to home, your child or a parent, perhaps. Well, at the risk of earning the opprobrium of his legions of detractors, he is widely disliked. Can I make the reasonable case for a man who celebrates his 50th birthday today? Elon Musk. His mother, May, posted a picture of Musk as a baby. He was born in 1971 in Pretoria in South Africa. What makes Musk remarkable? His wealth, for sure. Only Jeff Bezos is richer, Jeff Bezos. But what makes Musk special is his unquenchable spirit. Setting up Tesla would be enough for most mere mortals, but Musk wants to colonize space as well. SpaceX are doing things in orbit nobody thought possible, not least the Chinese and Russians, whose state-run missions are trailing in Musk's wake. Well, there are plenty of people who think Musk is just the world's biggest show-off, the latest in a long line, who are living proof of toxic masculinity. Why, they say, spend all that lolly on rockets when millions still die of disease on Earth? Well, Musk has an answer to that criticism. He says that the human race needs a plan B. He's not a climate change denier. He just thinks that it would be imprudent not to make sure that if we can make the tech work, we should find other potential homes within our solar system. Musk has a talent for gimmickry and stunts. That said, he'll have to go some to keep up with his arch-rival Bezos, the Amazon founder, who next month blasts into space on one of his own Blue Origin rockets. He's persuaded his brother to go along with him. It's never carried actual astronauts before. Musk, by contrast, may not have the right stuff, but he has something else: galactic levels of chutzpah. He creates wealth and is not afraid to spend it. From the cars we drive to the future of the species, he's the living proof of the power of an individual to change the course of history as we live through it. So for that reason and that reason alone, it is happy birthday, Elon Musk. Thanks very much indeed for joining us tonight. Stand by. Coming up next, we've got Dan Wootton. Lots on the show tonight. He'll take you through the latest moves in Parliament, latest on COVID, and all the stories that matter to you. Stay with us here on GB News.
Hello again. A fine and clear night to come across the north, but further south there's going to be a lot of cloud around and the potential for one or two further thunderstorms. There's a Met Office yellow warning in place because of this area of low pressure. It's a pretty slow-moving area of low pressure, but where we've seen the sun come out through the afternoon, that's warmed the skies enough to create a few heavy downpours. Not everywhere seeing them, but where we have seen the thunderstorms, potentially causing some disruption, some local flooding. They'll fade through the evening, but the chance of further heavy rain returning to the south coast through the early hours. One or two showers over parts of northern England and Wales, but much of Scotland, Northern Ireland dry and clear, and it will be a cool night in the far north with temperatures well down into single figures. But here a fine day on Tuesday, plenty of sunshine across Scotland, much of northern England brightening up as well, and Northern Ireland too, and eventually north and west Wales cheering up also. But for much of the Midlands, South Wales, quite cloudy, a little bit of showery rain. And again in the far south, there's the risk of some heavy showers. They'll again be very much hit and miss, and many places won't see them and stay dry. And again, the sunshine makes a big difference. Where we see it, 23, 24 is likely. Cooler on the coasts and cooler where it stays cloudy across the south. Still a few showers around here through Tuesday night. And just look at the cloud increasing across eastern areas as we head into Wednesday morning. Bit of drizzle here and there as well. So quite a grey and damp start to Wednesday across eastern England, again with a lot of cloud around, temperatures mostly holding up in double figures or even into the teens. Wednesday then is a bit of an east-west split with much of eastern England rather drab, some showery rain here and there. Elsewhere largely dry and brightening up all the while. Sunny spells across Wales and southwest England may just spark one or two showers, but again for much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, it will be a fine and sunny day where temperatures again will get over 20 Celsius. Goodbye.
Looking for something sporty, something family, or even something luxury? Why buy a brand new car when you can lease with Select Car Leasing? Choose any leading model and find your ideal car at a budget to suit you. Visit selectcarleasing.co.uk today.
Joggers, our slouching around companion. Well, it's been great, but dear wardrobe.
We've missed you. Who remembers jeans?
Rose!
And prints.
And colour.
Go rediscover your wardrobe. because the summer is ours. So let's dress well to feel good.
2. Be you.
It's never been easier to hold into instant cash with NM Money Gold. From necklaces to rings, whatever the gold, whatever the condition, we aim to have the best gold prices on the high street. Turn your gold into instant cash with NM Money Gold. Find one of our branches near you at nmgold.co.uk.
Magic family moments deserve the perfect setting. A stylish awning from House is the ideal addition to your outdoor space. Available in a range of colours and finishes, and with the option of integrated lighting and heating, you can enjoy your outdoor space for even longer. Now that is magic. House awnings, made for life.
You want your car in good hands with expertise for spares, repairs and MOTs. You want your annual service ticked off. That's great. And in store, there's batteries fit while you wait. You've not far to go for a garage or store.
That's 750!
But wait, there's more. You want mobile experts to fit tyres on your drive while you relax and...
Take 5.
For all your car needs and none of the fuss. You want Halfords, the name you can trust.
Listen to you, Petronella.
Tonight, we're live with Petronella Wyatt, Professor Carol Sikora and US journalism game changer Barry Weiss. And as ever, I'm joined by our superstar panel, Benjamin Butterworth, Carol Malone and Neil Oliver. This is Tonight Live with me, Dan Wootton. Let's go. What a breath of fresh air. The new Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, in Parliament today actually put a little bit of a smile on my face. I never thought I'd say that. While the news was still bad, Freedom Day will not be granted to us on July the 5th, Javid's tone was in total contrast. Gone were the doomsday warnings and scare tactics from the hypocrite-in-chief Hancock. Gone too was the lecturing tone used to hector us with constant demands on our lives and personal behaviours, which we now know Hancock was not even bothering to follow himself. Instead, Javad Weiss wanted to assure the population that he is working towards taking us back to normal life as soon as humanly possible. I believed him too. Have a look at what the new Health Secretary had to say in his first major statement to Parliament.
People and businesses need certainty, so we want every step to be irreversible. And make no mistake, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the restrictions on our freedoms, they must come to an end. We owe it to the British people, who have sacrificed so much to restore their freedoms as quickly as we possibly can, and not to wait a moment longer than we need to. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, with the numbers heading in the right direction, all while we protect more and more people each day, July the 19th remains our target date. The Prime Minister has called it our terminus date. For me, 19th July is not only the end of the line, but the start of an exciting new journey for our country. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, at this crucial moment in our fight back against this pandemic, we must keep our resolve and keep on our roadmap to freedom, so that together we can beat this pandemic and we can build back better. It is a task that I am deeply honoured to lead, and one I know will succeed.
Now, critically, Sajid Javid also explicitly ruled out a zero COVID strategy, stressing we cannot eliminate it. Instead, we have to learn to live with it. Thank God Hancock decided to break his own COVID laws by tonguing his publicly funded hired help, because he may just have granted us a health secretary who is up to the challenge of recovering from this pandemic. During his time on the backbenches, Javid had pointed out concerns about the economic and social costs of lockdown, becoming one of the first senior Tories to break rank last May. And as a well-placed source told the Daily Telegraph today, he's a real lockdown sceptic. He's convinced that in a few years' time, with the economic costs so high, everyone will be thinking, why the hell did we do that? the tilt in the cabinet has just shifted quite considerably. Now, I'm very passionate about this. Lockdown scepticism doesn't mean opposing all forms of restrictions by any means. But what it does suggest to me, Javid will be prepared to adequately consider the costs and benefits of regulations in the future. That's all I've been asking for these past few months. For the past year, Australia has gladly taken the international plaudits for its coronavirus strategy, which has attempted to achieve the impossible: zero COVID. The country has brutally tried to contain the virus by banning all international travel, testing international law by blocking the re-entry of citizens from hotspots like India, and turning state against state with a draconian border policy. But as I have been saying, a zero COVID strategy is a dangerous fantasy. Parts of Australia, like its second biggest city, Melbourne, have been forced into a constant cycle of lockdowns due to even a solitary case, just one. Now, there's a major outbreak in Sydney of the Indian variant, which has forced a 14-day lockdown in New South Wales. And because of the zero COVID policy, there is no general immunity in the community. And the country's vaccine rollout has been painfully slow, with vaccine hesitancy high in a land that felt completely protected from the virus. Of course, Australia wasn't protected. The virus still got in. It always does. And now, just as the rest of the Western world is thinking about a return to normal life, thanks to our vaccine success story, Australia is facing a very uncertain future. Moving on, I think the Home Secretary Priti Patel is right to introduce laws that will allow the government to process asylum seekers offshore. The Nationality and Borders Bill should allow the UK to share a centre with Denmark, possibly in the African nation of Rwanda. Something has to be done. Over 315 migrants crossed the channel in small boats over the weekend. 315. That means the total this year is now over 5,600. And finally, in the digest tonight, new Countdown host Dan Robinson has been a breath of fresh air these past few weeks on why we all need to reject the ridiculous cancel culture sweeping through the entertainment industry. So when I heard today that the BBC is relaunching her famous game show, The Weakest Link, in prime time, I was delighted. Imagine the snowflakes having to deal with Anne's acerbic put-downs in 2021. That would be a sight to behold. I mean, as Anne herself said this past week, I wouldn't get away with a lot of it now. We're very woke these days. And sure enough, my hopes were quickly dashed. The gutless bosses at the Beeb are bringing back The Weakest Link, but without Anne Robinson. Instead, the nice guy comedian Romesh Ranganathan will be taking up the hosting duties, which makes the whole thing an entire letdown from the get-go. That's my view of the world tonight, but I'm sure some of my superstar panel will think differently. They'll take me on shortly. But also coming up in Tonight Live, in the clash, Enver Solomon of the Refugee Council and former Border Force Chief Tony Smith will be going head-to-head over Priti Patel's plans to process asylum claims in Rwanda. In The Positive Professor at 9:30, priorities need to be now that he's looking after the nation's health. And an uncancelled at 11, the New York Times writer who quit and caused an international sensation, Barry Weiss, on cancel culture and the state of journalism. Why is Twitter starting to edit our newspapers? Plus, we'll have all the breaking headlines and tomorrow's news tonight in our Media Buzz, including why Emily Maitlis has broken BBC impartiality rules again. You couldn't make it up, could you? And as always, before the end of the show, we'll reveal today's greatest British and Union jackass, which is definitely worth staying up for. But the voice of our viewers matters more to me than anything else on this show, and that's why at 10 p.m, when those other channels tell you what you should be thinking, we're going to allow you to share your questions and your opinions with Great Britain. Tonight, we have Boris Johnson's former lover, the acclaimed journalist and author Petronella Wyatt here. She'll be joining us to answer your questions as the Matt affair rumbles on. So why do so many politicians give it all sex? What do you think? Now's the time to get in touch. You can send us your questions to gbviews@gbnews.uk. Tweet us at gbnews, and you can Facebook your question by searching for GB News. Can't wait to hear from what you think in just under 60 minutes' time. But joining me is my panel, who will be with me. In the studio is Chief Reporter for the iNewspaper, Benjamin Butterworth, along with the columnist and commentator, Carol Malone, who writes for the Daily Express, and down the line from his castle, is it a castle in Stirling? Neil
yes.
Oliver. It's a castle, is it, Neil?
Well, we like to think so.
Okay, good. I'm looking forward to my invitation. So, Neil, you obviously share my views when it comes to lockdown. Do you also share my positivity about Sajid Javid, the new health secretary, who seemed to take a very different...
Well, I would say I have deep cynicism about the likely, confidence of any of them to do what I would like to see done, which is to end lockdown now. I remain to be persuaded. I know that Sajid Javid has a history of having been sceptical about lockdown over the period, but the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. I will believe it when I see it. I just foresee yet more excuses, yet more delays, more dragging of feet. And to be honest with you, that's the way I see it going.
I mean, Carol, I guess one of the issues is he today feels like a bit of a lockdown skeptic. Is he going to be bogged down by SAGE, bogged down by the scientists, bogged down by the NHS executives? I mean, I guess the key question is, can Sajid Javid hold firm?
The thing about Sajid Javid is he's never held any job down long enough for him to be accountable for any long-term delivery of any kind. So we don't know how good he is in any job. I mean, I know you're passionate. I know you're enthusiastic. I know he is known as a safe pair of hands. He's a very serious-minded politician. He knows how Whitehall works. But I'm not entirely sure Sajid is tough enough to deal with what's coming up. He hasn't just got COVID to deal with, which is a huge job on his own. He's got the biggest backlog ever in NH history to deal with. Millions of operations, millions of treatments and surgeries that have been missed. He has to do that. Matt Hancock was actually going to introduce the Health and Social Care Bill this year. We don't know whether Javid is going to do that or whether he's going to do a version of it. He's going to have to take on board the money, the billions that are wasted in the NHS. So I'm not sure he is up to a job as big as that.
Benjamin Butterworth, take me on this one. I mean, presumably, I imagine, given you've been very pro-lockdown, you might even be concerned that there's someone with lockdown sceptical views in such an important position.
I mean, look, I hate the characterisation that people who have supported lockdown have somehow wanted this at the cost of real life or wanted it for the sake of it. The fact that all this time. Now, I find it extraordinary that
Matt Hancock obviously doesn't seem to think so.
Well, unlike Matt Hancock, I've been following the rules, and I found it extraordinary that Sajid Javid seemed to say that we would definitely end on 19th of July. He as good as guaranteed it in what he said to the House of Commons today. Now, that was on a day when we had 23,000 new COVID cases. However, and I think this is significant, he said, I think over the weekend, we extended this lockdown by a month because we had to get 2/3 of adults double jabbed. And if we get that, we're out of lockdown. And to me, that strikes me as fair because the last day that we had 23,000 COVID cases, there were 910 deaths reported at that same day. Today, I think there was about 11 deaths. And so I think that shows how well the vaccine is working. And for me, if we meet that vaccine target by the 19th of July. I got my second jab yesterday, so I'm now in his 2/3 to let us out of lockdown. Then I think that would be reasonable. But I don't think it should be that way if we miss the target.
Dan, you raised the point before about SAGE scientists, Is he going to have the guts to take them on, especially when Boris is actually saying all the time that he's following the science, he's following the scientists? If what the scientists are saying, or he thinks they're being too cautious, is he going to have the guts to take them on and the Prime Minister at the same time?
Well, indeed. And I think the key question comes, When we head into winter, seasonal flu goes up, the NHS drumbeat for potentially being overwhelmed begins again. Neil, but I think people keep saying we want to talk about the data. Well, let's look at the data. The day today, fewer than 1 in 1,000 COVID-19 infections are now resulting in deaths. That's according to calculations by statisticians at Cambridge. The infection fatality rate of the disease is about 0.085%, and among those aged 75 and over, it has plummeted from more than 15% of those catching coronavirus dying at the height of the winter wave to under 2% now. The vaccines work. There's no reason for us to stay locked down.
They're making it impossible for themselves, I think, because of the testing, the scale of the testing. You know, they're testing 1 million people a day, which, when compared to countries like Germany and elsewhere in Europe, who are attempting a tenth of that, the number of positives that are coming back from 1 million tests a day, they're always going to have positive cases at a level which will frighten them and the public who've become so obsessed with these figures. It will frighten them back into dragging their heels about ending restrictions, and will constantly raise the spectre of lockdown. Kafkaesque. You know, they're now testing and finding positives. Positive cases aren't people who are ill. They aren't translating into people going into hospital. It's just columns of figures. But because of testing 1 million people a day, the resultant positives, it's a number that is alarming, looked at just as a big number. They've made it impossible for themselves. I just don't see, if they keep doing what they've been doing, getting out of this. There will always be reasons to extend the lockdown.
Benjamin, why are we testing so much? What's the point?
I mean, this sounds slightly like Donald Trump, who used a similar argument back when he was still the US president. Look, the testing is an important thing, because the more we test, the more we can clamp down on the people that have got COVID and stop them spreading it and isolate effectively.
No, the more you test, the more positives you get, false positives included. That number will always be high.
But Neil, you also get false negatives. So, you know, they pretty much balance each other out. And the important thing is that if you're testing, if you let me finish, Neil, if you're testing people, then you're going to find the people that really have COVID, and then that'll reduce the number of people that they'll pass it on to. The idea that you should be opposed to testing is not based in science. It's based in pure wishful thinking.
Neil,
it's not having COVID, being a positive. If it doesn't translate to people who are ill, people who are having to go into and putting the NHS under pressure, then having COVID becomes no more significant than having the common cold. Just because someone tests positive doesn't mean anything.
He's entirely right. You know, we don't test people every year for flu, and we certainly don't keep it down if someone has flu. If COVID is not, the only time it matters is if people are being taken to hospital or if they're dying of it, and we know an all-time low. And hospitals, the people in hospital schools, so we can't keep on testing. If you tested all of the population for every virus on the planet, everyone would have some kind of virus.
But hang on, you know, there's things like long COVID, there's still getting so into your school because you're too unwell. Those aren't things that we should freely allow to happen.
We can't. The science on long COVID is quite very much about long COVID, and so we can't be basing what we do as a country and our economy on people who are suffering from long COVID.
Neil?
Yeah, long COVID, as Carol says, the jury's out on exactly what long COVID is. That is, it's a phenomenon at the moment, and that, needs to be set in one place. But this continued obsession with testing more and more people will always generate figures that will, in and of themselves, appear like reasons to lock down if it's all about to get to a point where people have COVID. What's the point in knowing about it if people aren't ill? What's the point? COVID only matters if people are being made ill by it, and if the hospitals are being put under pressure by the numbers of people who are needing intensive care on account of it. People having COVID but being asymptomatic or just having mild symptoms, it's irrelevant. We need to move on. We need to stop testing, get beyond it.
Yeah.
End the lockdown, get people back into a normal way of life. Otherwise, we're going to be in this Kafkaesque nonsense forever.
Yeah, and today for me was about tone. because the government policy didn't change today. Freedom Day is still stuck on July 19th. I'm sure Neil agrees with me that it should be the 5th of July and there's no reason to stop it, and there was no reason to stop it last month. But for me, Benjamin, today was about tone. And I felt like Sajid Javid strikes a very different tone to Matt Hancock. I think the tone is right. It's about we're going to get our freedoms back. Matt Hancock seemed to want to take our freedoms away forevermore.
Well, you know, where I have to agree with you is that I had quite liked Matt Hancock for a long time. But for a while, he was coming across as incredibly arrogant, almost like he was enjoying the power he had. I agreed with the decisions he was taking, but I still felt that he had some pleasure in putting the country in that situation that always frustrated me a little bit. Now, I think you've seen the politics change in Parliament. Jeremy Hunt, the previous Health Secretary, he praised Hancock, and it was almost inaudible, the cheers from in Parliament. Basically, nobody celebrated him.
Well, Carol, that's very ironic,
revealing,
isn't it? Jeremy Hunt praising Matt Hancock. Jeremy Hunt, the former Health Secretary who failed to prepare the nation for an overwhelming pandemic, praising the Health Secretary who introduced all of these draconian rules to our lives and then refused to follow them himself. I would say both of them can...
Well, yes, and I think you're right, but, you know, you talked about tone, Dan, and, you know, the thing is, if I was Sajid Javid, I would have stood up today in the Commons and do exactly what he did. He's not going to come on and repeat the same nonsense that Hancock was saying the whole time. He will have been briefed on what he should be saying to give this tone, because why would people want him there if he was going to be exactly like Matt Hancock? You know, the truth will be in what he does over the next few weeks. You know, there's a lot of criticism already that he is Carrie's appointment. You know, he's one of the FOC's, Friends of Carrie, and Carrie's been lobbying for him to get a job for a very long time because she used to work for him. They're very good friends.
Yeah, but he's a former Chancellor, Carol.
Well, he's not for long, Dan.
No, but
he's never been in any job for very long.
I know, but he did do that job. He was forced out by Dominic Cummings. Boris Johnson now admits that was a big mistake on his part.
Well, he admits it because Carrie's probably said it's a big mistake on his part.
Well, look, I feel like we've had so much negative news, and everyone knows that when it comes to lockdown, I tend to feel pretty pessimistic. So I wanted to embrace the positive today. I think you're right. At the end of the day, we have to judge Sajid Javid on his actions, but his words were right. And I think that's critical because we have to start talking about getting back to normal. And that's exactly what he did. But that is my superstar panel. They're with me all evening. Carol Malone, Benjamin Butterworth, and Neil Oliver. But Carol Sikora, the positive professor, is still to come. What would he do if he was the new Health Secretary? We'll find out. But up next, in the clash, Enver Solomon of the Refugee Council and former Border Force Chief Tony Smith will go head-to-head over Priti Patel's new asylum plans and the question of whether offshore processing of refugees is moral.
You know what they say, if you don't ask, you don't get. Customers, pick up your Sky Remote and say get Discovery Plus and get 12 months of Discovery Plus at no extra cost. Get brand new, exclusive, can't see them anywhere else Discovery Plus originals. Get unmissable, bingeable box sets and get jaw-dropping real-life entertainment. But you don't get any hidden costs and you don't get tied into a rolling contract. Get Discovery Plus for 12 months at no extra cost with Sky Q. Say get Discovery Plus into your voice remote or visit sky.com/Discovery Plus.
Friday's Euro Millions can make 20 UK winners' dreams come true. Not that dream, this one. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Play on app, online and in-store.
From falling in love and finding a home to spending your time making it your own. Perhaps it's just you and your four-legged friend, or maybe you have your savings to spend. A man about town with an apartment in mind, or simply looking for a bigger find. Find out how we can help you along life's journey. With access to all lenders, Flagstone can support you in getting the best mortgage deal to suit your personal needs. Why not give us a call or visit flagstone.co.uk. Your home may be repossessed if you do not keep up repayments on your mortgage.
Say hello to the latest in flexible family holidays. The Ford Transit Custom Nugget offers compact dimensions with great possibilities. It's packed with innovative technology to give you everything you need. And whilst the space on the inside is amazing, wait until you see the space outside. Are you ready to escape to the wild? To start your journey, visit AM Philip Truck Tech, Scotland's Ford Transit Custom Nugget dealer.
my lunch. Can I have a 10x for cream, please?
Now, that's the last one. So if you see a big brother, you share it with him, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Can you see him?
No.
Come on, Ben, help me to
It's time for the positive Professor Carol Sikora is here to dispel the gloom of the lockdown doom mongers. But on that point, our COVID head prefect, Matt Hancock, has gone. Carol is with me now. I presume you think Hancock had to go?
Yeah, there was no choice. And I'm just surprised he wasn't fired immediately, but there it is. But, you know, I think out of all things come something good. And I think change was necessary. And I think it's great. And I think we've got the right man in the job now. He's got a tremendous opportunity. Next month, an appointment will be made to the second most important health job in the country, the Chief Executive of NHS England, to replace Sir Simon Stevens. So we've got a completely new crew at the helm of the NHS. So real opportunities for change, Dan.
Yeah, and how do you think people in the NHS have reacted, Carol, to the fact that Matt Hancock so flagrantly broke the rules?
They're not happy. There's no doubt that talking around in the coffee room today, people are really unhappy, but they're always unhappy with politicians, whether they're left or right. Now, if you analyse why people love the NHS, it's because it's free. It's what we call universal healthcare, free at the point of care based on medical needs. So no one can disagree with that as a principle. It's like apple pie and motherhood. It's the same deal. The problem comes on how to deal with the complexity of modern medicine in a cash-restricted environment. We haven't got unlimited funds. And a lot of them growing bureaucracy, poor IT structure, and a lack of capacity. That's what we see all the time. Winter pressures is one of the great words I've heard. I've been a consultant for 40 years, Dan, and I've heard winter pressures every winter for those years. And it just means we haven't got enough beds to deal with people that are coming in, mainly elderly, with chest infection. And that's the problem. And as we just heard in the little debate, COVID is just one problem. It's not going to go away. And if it does go away, something else will come in its place. So we've got to do something better. So, you know, the new health minister has got my full backing to see if we can radically reform the way we work much more efficiently and improve the quality that we all want to get.
OK, so, Carol, imagine that you were in Sajid Javid's shoes. It is an absolutely mammoth task. What is the first thing you would do as the new health secretary?
I think the first thing is to see what's wrong with the NHS and try and paste over the cracks, which is what we see all the time. You know, oh, there's nothing wrong with cancer services. So, OK, for the last 20 years, we've been below the results you get in Europe. So why are we bottom? Work it out and solve it. You've got enough experts there to tell you what the problem is. You just need to solve it. It's not just money, it's organisation. One of the things I see as an oncologist is the referral from primary care, that's the GP, to the hospital, is slow and cumbersome. And that could really be improved. Now, there's all sorts of ways of doing it. The cardiologists have done it for heart attacks. We could do it for cancer. I think there's lots of things that would be quick wins and wouldn't actually cost very much. And actually, they're not so worried for so long about what they may have. I think the other thing is, instead of thinking of it as a money problem, think of it as a structural problem of an organization. It's big, it's creaky, and, you know, doesn't always provide the best possible care that it could. It has the expertise. We all think doctors and nurses are wonderful. We are, of course. The problem is how we organize ourselves, and we need administrative help to organize ourselves and that's sort of missing within the NHS.
What did you think of Sajid Javid's tone today, Professor Sikora? Because front page of the Daily Telegraph describes the new health secretary as a lockdown skeptic, and he certainly seemed to have a completely different take on how we can recover compared to Matt Hancock?
He's much more in keeping with how we both believe the system should go. I mean, we're not going to go into a zero COVID environment. It's just not possible. It's not feasible, and it's unachievable even in any of our lifetimes. And if we did, there'd be something else coming along. So I think he's honest. He knows that. He also knows that getting out of lockdown is irreversible. We can't go in and out, in and out. It ruins the economy. It ruins people's mental health. And, you know, the other thing I think he understands is that you don't test people that aren't ill. And although at the moment, the test rate is going up, 22,000 people in the last 24 hours, but the number of people going to hospital constantly less than 250. It's fantastic. There's a complete divergence, whether it's the vaccine, whether it's the virus, whether it's people's behavior. It has changed drastically from a few months back. This is good news. And it means that we carry on blasting through whatever the mathematicians at Imperial College say. Look, let's just keep going. Let's get us out of here, get back to normal, stop testing kids at school, stop closing places down when one person gets test positive, and let's move forward. And I think Sajid understands that and has the will to try and do it and really interrogate the committees, the SAGE, the advisors, when they advise doing things that aren't in keeping with quickly getting out of lockdown. We're quite close to July 19th. It's not far ahead. Let's just go for it. And I think he's our man. I think to make him change it to the 5th of July, which is I've seen as one of the plans, it's not really likely that he can do that. We didn't really understand until this week what was happening with the increased case numbers, but the lack of hospital admissions. I think now it's getting clear this is not a dangerous illness at the moment, probably mainly because of vaccination.
Yeah, it would have been too much too soon, given the bloke only got the job on Saturday. But one thing I just want to pick up with you, Carol, is this term lockdown skeptic, because it has been used over the past year as an insult. A lot of the media, if they brand someone a lockdown skeptic, it's as if it's a bad thing. I take a very different view on this. I actually would love it if the Health Secretary is a lockdown skeptic, is he'll think very, very carefully before plunging the country into lockdown again, before introducing draconian regulations on our lives. All I want is some scepticism in government that actually lockdowns aren't always the best answer.
Exactly. And I think he is the best we're going to get. He'll come out tomorrow. As you said, the bloke only got his job on Saturday. But I think he will interrogate people that suggest gloomy outcomes in a much closer way than the Secretary of State, who seem to accept the gloom and doom of the SAGE committee. And the way this committee works is the same. I've seen it in hospitals over the years. You get 20 people in a room. They're all experts in their own field, and you've got to make a decision. So the group is going one direction, and then one or two people suddenly say, well, this is dangerous if we do that. We're all going to die. It can't be done. We're going to kill thousands of people. The care homes will all die and so on. You get all this stuff. And the others are too scared to actually let it go. And at the end of it, they go with a more dangerous scenario. I think Sajid won't do that. He'll interrogate people. So we'll get out of this. I'm really hopeful. Not only will we get out of this, but the NHS is going to do well after. It'll be painful going through a shake-up, but it needs a good shake-up.
So Carol, there's a real irony, isn't there, that this sex scandal between Hancock and his paid advisor, a woman called Gina Collet-Angelo, who was earning £15,000 a year as Hancock's advisor, paid for by us. There's a real irony that this sex scandal may actually have delivered the nation a much better health secretary. I mean, should we be thanking Gina Collet-Angelo for this inappropriate snog?
I don't think I can comment on that, but it's very sad at a personal level, as you know, and what a way to go for your family and all the rest of it, two families involved. But in terms of with COVID and where we are with the health service, it just needed some sort of shake-up. And if Sajid can't do it, no one can. I mean, that's the issue. He's got experience in government. He understands finances. I mean, he's got a great background. If you read his bio, it's just tremendous. A boy who's an immigrant family, brought up in Rochdale with 4 brothers. And, you know, this kid has not got a privileged background whatsoever compared to a lot of people, certainly in Conservative government. And I think it's just to get there, he has to have inner talent. And that's why I think he's got a good chance. But you're right. It's going to be tough. And it doesn't matter who's in charge, it's going to be tough. And he's got to bring the lockdown skeptics with him. He's got to bring the other guys with him. He's got to bring the anti-vaxxers along. He's got to move them all along. And it's going to be a challenge. But I think we should support him.
Yeah, and I think Hancock had probably annoyed so many parts of the population, actually, some sort of reset in terms of our relationship as a nation with the person who is Health Secretary. It's become such an important job. I mean, it was always an important job, but it's arguably now a more important cabinet post at this time than Chancellor. So some sort of reset in terms of our relationship with the person in that role, not a bad thing.
I think exactly right. And of course, being health secretary is not about being obsessed with COVID. And that's what we've seen, this obsession with COVID and the NHS. We've got to get out of that. We've got to make sure all the other important diseases, even to things that you don't see, like deafness in small children. I mean, it's so sad. The services have just been whittled away over the years anyway. And then suddenly, with this, you remove them altogether. And, you know, I've got no vested interest in that, but it's things like that, part of the NHS, that's the whole principle, that everything gets treated. And that just got thrown out. Of course, my specialty, cancer, same thing happened there. And there's no doubt a lot of people died in 2020 with cancer unnecessarily because they didn't get through the system in time before their cancer spread. So it's really important that the new bosses of the NHS both make sure that COVID goes into the box it deserves. It doesn't deserve changing the priorities of the health service. Huge mistakes were made. But, you know, it's easy to say there were mistakes in retrospect. Just look at the Nightingale hospitals. It was a farce, really, to think you could staff them. Where were you going to get the experienced nurses, doctors, technicians, ventilatory experts, and so on? It just wasn't possible. They weren't to hand. So why embark on a multi-billion-pound scheme without that staffing plan right up front, how you're going to do it? And you just can't import a load of people from an agency to come and work in the East End on your Excel conference centre with hundreds of beds. You may get the beds and the infrastructure, but you won't get the people. And that's what we need in the NHS. We need people, educated people at all levels.
So, Carol, final question. Marks out of 10 for Health Secretary Hancock. What do you rate him?
6, I'm afraid. I would rate it as 6. Forget what happened in the end. That's sort of irrelevant to performance as health secretary. But nothing's really changed in the NHS over his reign. And there were no real plans for radical change. There was too much hiding away, saying, oh, this is not really a problem. And it was a problem. And tokenism. So in my business, we've got this, we've got expensive number of patients getting them. And the quality of overall care, it was below Western Europe, below countries, even towards the east of Europe. My father was Polish. I've been to Poland many times. And that improvement we've seen in Polish healthcare is tremendous. On the NHS, we've seen a sort of flatness that's not improved as the years have gone by. So I think Hancock, he's not really made a dent. The health service will have forgotten about him in 2 years' time completely.
Yeah, I give him 5 out of 10, Professor, because I think the vaccine rollout was a success and he takes a small amount of credit for that, although the vast majority of it goes to Kate Bingham. But Professor Positivity, Carol Sikora, great to have something positive to talk to you about today. Thank you so much. We'll speak again next week. Coming up, though, there's still time for you to make your voice heard in tonight's big question. Tonight, we have Boris Johnson's former lover, the acclaimed journalist and author Petronella Wyatt, on why politicians just seem to keep falling as a result of scandals. She'll be joining us to answer your questions, and there's still time to get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk on email. You can tweet us at gbnews or Facebook your question by searching for GB News. But up next, in The Clash, Enver Solomon of the Refugee Council and former Border Force Chief Tony Smith will be going head-to-head over Priti Patel's new asylum plans and the question of whether offshore processing of refugees is a good thing. Back soon.
The Sainsbury's quality you expect is now price matched to Aldi. King prawns for £1.67. Spaghetti for 40p. Find hundreds of Sainsbury's products now price matched to Aldi.
Getting a deal at affordablemobiles.co.uk can feel incredible. Feel the deal. Feel it. Feel the deal today with affordablemobiles.co.uk.
This is Sophie. She has a meeting with her accountant this afternoon. Carl's VAT return is due. And Dave's just got his quarterly update. Get all relaxed about tax. Tax Assist accountants make things simple so you can focus on growing your business. Go online to find your local Tax Assist shop and switch today. Tax Assist Accountants, your trusted advisor on the high street.
This summer, Virgin Media is dropping mobile deals like it's hot. Drop it like it's hot. Check out our summer deals drop at virginmedia.com.
When we all play the National Lottery a little, fun stuff happens. Like keeping our beaches clean and safe for everyone.
Past and the present and the future.
Bringing history to life.
The heart and the brain and the body.
Funding museums for all to enjoy. Supporting inspiring music programs and helping people explore the great outdoors. £30 million a week to good causes. The National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
We're back. Home Secretary Priti Patel will introduce laws next week to enable the government to send asylum seekers abroad for processing as she opens talks with Denmark over sharing a centre in Rwanda, Central Africa. The Nationality and Borders Bill will include a provision to create an offshore immigration processing centre for asylum seekers for the first time. Boris Johnson is said to be keen on the plan after the arrival in Britain this year of more than 5,600 migrants who have crossed the Channel in small boats. Nigel Farage was on the scene today. He's not convinced. This is what he had to say.
A shingle beach in Kent, and yes, no surprise, a beach landing a dinghy. There were 20 on board. They've scarpered. There's like a big manhunt going on now right across the Romney Marshes. We're here at Dungeness, and this on the day that once again Priti Patel tells us she's going to get tough. All these people will be deported to somewhere in Africa where their asylum claims are going to be processed. It will never happen. 20 on this boat, another landing 3 miles down, 45 on that boat. Why are they reaching the beaches? You can see it's a foggy day, very difficult for Border Force or anybody else to pick them up. So I've heard of 45, 20, I've heard of 33 in the Dover already this morning. We are currently running at double the rate of last year. It will be at least 20,000 this year, unless something is done. That is coming at a massive cost in this country. And please bear this in mind. When the newspapers show you pictures of young kids and women, 85% of those that come are young men between 18 and 28 years old. And frankly, we've no idea who any of them are. And Priti Patel, well, I'd say pretty useless.
Enver Solomon of the Refugee Council, however, disagrees with Farage. He calls Priti Patel's plan nasty, ill thought out and a policy that is doomed to fail. But former Border Force Chief Tony Smith says that while France continues to refuse to return migrants at sea, they will continue to risk their lives on this dangerous crossing and human smugglers will continue to benefit. So we need to look at other options. Both join me now. Enver, why are you opposed to this plan?
Well, we accept that people coming across the channel on boats are a challenge to this government and that the government has a commitment to want to take back control of its borders. We just don't think this is the way to do it. We need to understand that as a nation, for generations, people have come to this country taking their lives into their own hands, fleeing the Nazis, fleeing the Shah, the tyranny in Iran, fleeing the war in Yugoslavia more recently, the wars in Afghanistan and Syria, and we've always given them a fair hearing on British soil. And if they need protection, if they need to be given safety in the UK, we has always done that. And we must continue to do that. We must continue to treat people humanely and give them protection when they are fleeing war and persecution. Refugees exist in this country today, contributing to our communities. If you look at just at the NHS and the fight against COVID and the pandemic, there have been so many doctors, nurses, care workers, auxiliaries who have come here as refugees. And we need to continue to welcome those who need our protection.
Tony Smith, what's your view on the plan?
So this is the government now to put into law, into UK law, their policy to take back control of our borders. We know the mighty English Channel is a significant problem for them. It is largely or significantly international organised crime. The smugglers have no regard for life or limb. They're in it for the money. And I'm afraid they're in it for the money. It continues unchecked. And I'm afraid that if this way, it continues unchecked, the supply chain continues to flow. And that's why the numbers are going up, because more people are being encouraged to try this route, and very few are ultimately being returned, either to France or at the end of their application to the homeland. So I think the government is now putting into legislation a range of measures. This one, the potential for offshore processing, also for treating people arriving from safe third countries or passing through safe differently from others, are very radical new policies, but they will, I think, impact upon international law, and it'll be much, much more difficult to implement these things when it comes down to the practical operation of how to deal with this particular problem of migrant smuggling across the English Channel.
Enver, this program was used successfully in Australia, offshore processing. It did stop the boats. They sent illegal migrants to countries like Papua New Guinea, where they would be processed. Why do you think the Australian example doesn't provide a blueprint for what our government could do?
Well, I'm not sure the Australian example did work. It depends who you talk to. If you look at the work that's been done there to document the impact of offshore processing on the mental health, the well-being of very traumatised torture victims, for example, who were seeking safety in Australia, it resulted in them self-harming, attempting suicide. The outcomes were pretty horrendous and brutal and very cruel. You know, the last time we tried to offshore people was centuries ago, when we were sending prisoners to be held in gulags overseas. We have a proud tradition in this country of upholding principles of fairness, of humanity and compassion. We are seen as a global leader in challenging those who violate human rights. We, as a result of that, have always prided ourselves on giving people a fair hearing who come to this country.
We allow the boats to continue to arrive in, but then we encourage people smuggling and criminals, don't we?
Well, if you let me finish, I'll explain. And that's exactly what we've always done. The way you put the criminal people smugglers out of business is you ensure that people are not forced to take their lives into their own hands and to risk these very dangerous journeys. And the way you do that is you create what are known as safe routes for people who are fleeing oppression, war and persecution. In the way that when people had to flee Idi Amin in Uganda decades ago, we welcomed people here who were fleeing torture, in the way that we welcomed 20,000 Syrians over the last few years who were fleeing the war. In the way today we are opening our country to individuals who have acted as translators in Afghanistan. All these people have had to flee war, persecution and oppression. You need to provide safe routes for them to enable them to come to Europe, and then European countries need to fairly share the burden between them.
But Tony, no one is saying that we shouldn't have legal immigration, especially for refugees who've gone through this sort of trauma. The issue with allowing this channel route to stay open is that the numbers are doubling year on year, and these people who are coming into the country are putting their lives at risk.
Yes, indeed. So we're conflating two issues here. There is a huge imbalance between the number of people seeking protection around the world and the numbers that countries are prepared to take, I'm afraid. Even the more generous countries, if you look at the figures, America, Canada, Australia, have significantly cut back their bids on UNHCR resettlement programs. We took 5,000. I think it's in 2019, the last figures I saw. And you say, well, that's just a drop in the bucket. If there's 80 million people displaced around the world and we're taking 5,000, we're not doing our bit. But we were still third highest in the world and highest in the EU. We need to understand the difference between refugee resettlement programs and asylum. So there are more asylum seekers, if you like, in South America and in various places than countries are prepared to take. That is an international problem. What we're dealing with on the English Channel is relatively new. It wasn't around when I was in the Border Force. It's happened because we've adopted a policy to interdict people on the French side. We've invested a lot of money in the port of Calais. We have our own Border Force teams operating with the French authorities to prevent human smuggling and to stop ports of entry. And so this is displacement. The smugglers are resorting to more dangerous routes. We have had drownings. We will, I fear, see more if we don't find a way of stopping this. Now, there's a solution, as far as I see it, is that France is a safe third country. There is provision in international law for us to come to an agreement with France, which would enable people, once we're satisfied they're safe and well, which is our priority, to enable their claim to be decided in the point of provenance. France is a country which is a signatory to the 1951 Convention on Refugees. It's also, like us, a founder member of the UN Convention on Human Rights.
I know, although France haven't been making this easy, and of course one of the reasons that Rwanda is being discussed is because Denmark are looking to do a deal with Rwanda for an offshore processing plant, and we could share the same resources. And the final word to you, if you don't want offshore processing, what stop the boats coming in?
Well, my solution is for us to do what we've always done, which is to allow people who are fleeing war, oppression and persecution to come to this country, to have a fair hearing, and if they're in need of protection, for us to give them safety and to enable them to integrate and contribute to this country. We're a country made up of a whole generation of people who have come from different nations and contributed to this country, including refugees and those people seeking asylum. They've gone on to keep us safe during this pandemic. They've gone on to contribute as business people to ensure that we're a successful, booming economy and a country that's thriving. We should continue to do that by upholding the principle of providing refugee protection to those who need it. Those who don't, absolutely, we should enable them to be returned to those countries, to their country. But those who need it, we should continue to welcome them and enable them to contribute to this country, because refugee protection is a great British value. Across the nation, refugees are woven into the fabric of many, many communities and have gone on to be proud British citizens, and we should continue to uphold that tradition today.
Refugee Council, and before that, the former Border Force Chief Tony Smith. Fascinating clash. Petronella Wyatt is on deck for tonight's big question. The acclaimed journalist and Boris Johnson's former mistress will take your questions on politicians and their love affairs. But after the break, wonder how theatres have got through lockdown. What about circuses? This is an important issue for me. We need our circuses to survive. So we will hear from a circus owner, a ringmaster you might say, who issued to the government. Well, did it work? He'll reveal all in just a moment.
You want your car in good hands with expertise for spares, repairs and MOTs. You want your annual service ticked off. That's great. And in store, there's batteries fit while you wait. You've not far to go for a garage or store.
That's 750!
But wait, there's more. You want mobile experts to fit tyres on your drive while you relax and...
Take 5.
For all your car needs and none of the fuss. You want Halfords.
I've always loved Muller Corner. Now I've created my own and filled it with love. It's my way of saying, love you, Mum and Dad. Try my new Muller Corner creations. Peel back and love.
It's never been easier to turn your unwanted gold into instant cash with NM Money Gold. From necklaces to rings, whatever the gold, whatever the condition, we aim to have the best gold prices on the high street. Turn your gold into instant cash with NM Money Gold. Find one of our branches near you at nmgold.co.uk.
Say hello to the latest in flexible family holidays. The Ford Transit Custom Nugget offers compact dimensions with great possibilities. It's packed with innovative technology to give you everything you need. And whilst the space on the inside is amazing, wait until you see the space outside. Are you ready to escape to the wild? To start your journey, visit AM Philip Truck Tech, Scotland's Ford Transit Customer.
Magic family moments deserve the perfect setting. A stylish awning from House is the ideal addition to your outdoor space. Available in a range of colours and finishes, and with the option of lighting and heating, you can enjoy your outdoor space for even longer. Now that is magic. House awnings, made for life.
Welcome back to Tonight Live. My superstar panel back with me, Carol Malone, Benjamin Butterworth and Neil Oliver. Carol Malone, it's an interesting one, this plan by Priti Patel, isn't it, to introduce the Nationality and Borders Bill, set up offshore processing of refugees potentially in Rwanda as part of this deal with the government of Denmark. But then you hear the Chief Executive of the Refugee Council saying this is inhumane. Where do you stand on it?
I'm not entirely sure because I haven't read it, because I didn't know you were coming to me on that, so your turn.
I mean, what I'd say is that I fear that putting the centre in Rwanda is a way to circumvent the obligations that we have to these asylum seekers. And also, it's going to make people that want to seek asylum in Britain, who deserve it under international treaties, they'll be less likely to do it because they're still maybe in their home country, they're in a landlocked nation of Rwanda. And I fear that there could be human lives of people that need to come to this country for rescue who will be put at risk by this.
Neil Oliver, what's your view on offshore refugee processing?
It's obviously very difficult and sensitive for a lot of people, but I think it comes down to whether or not people are seeking asylum, you know, people who are coming away from danger, you know, people who are bona fide refugees. I don't think anybody would dispute that you would want to be part of helping to provide, respite and sanctuary for people who've come out of those situations. But I think there's a strong suspicion amongst a lot of people in the country that in the main, the arrivals that we're seeing are economic migrants. And again, I mean, young guys wanting to take the opportunity to get somewhere where they think that they will be able to, find work and all the rest of it. Who would blame them? However, there has to be an acceptance that any country, whether it be Britain or anywhere else, it can only manage a certain number of people. It only has the infrastructure to provide the education, the housing, the health, and everything else for a certain number of people. If the increases that are being quoted are not sustainable, where are you going to find the homes for these people, the jobs for these people, the healthcare for these people, the education for these people? And so I think it comes down to whether or not we're actually dealing with asylum seekers coming away from danger, or are we dealing in the main with economic migrants who want a better life? And I think in the case of economic migrants, then they're clearly not in danger, and wherever they are, be it wherever they are in Europe, they're in France, Germany, Spain. These countries are perfectly safe, and where it's people who are seeking asylum, who are seeking sanctuary, then there have to be ways to handle those applications. And Rwanda is obviously a place that for a lot of people we've had a history that was upsetting. And it becomes a question of where should people be held offshore? Is it Africa or is it somewhere else? But I think in principle, in answer to your question, I think it's quite right that people be held in a safe third country, their applications processed, we find out exactly who they are and why they want to come to Britain. And in principle, I don't see anything wrong with offshore processing of would-be migrants.
No, fascinating stuff. That's our panel. Neil Oliver, Benjamin Butterworth, Carol Malone. They will be back with all the newspaper front pages as soon as they drop in the Media Buzz very shortly. But it's 10 p.m, the time when those other channels tend to tell you what you should be thinking. But this is where you have your chance to question some of the biggest newsmakers in the UK through GB Views. And after Matt Hancock threw away one of the most important jobs in the country to pursue an affair with Gina Coladangelo, tonight's big question is this: why are so many politicians prepared to risk their careers over sex? Or maybe love. Maybe I should be fair. Sex and love, perhaps, in the case of Matt Hancock. And to get this debate going, I'm joined in the studio by Boris Johnson's most famous mistress and the acclaimed journalist and author, Petronella Wyatt. Now, Petronella has a rare insight into why so many high-profile politicians have such colourful love lives. Because she, of course, famously had a 4-year affair with Boris in the early 2000s while he was editor of The Spectator, she his deputy. We do have Boris was married at the time to the barrister Marina Wheeler, and like Hancock, that affair cost him his job in the Tory shadow ministry. He was also the party's vice chairman. Petronella told how Boris had a decidedly Eastern attitude to monogamy, and he once grumbled to her, "I find it genuinely unreasonable that men should be confined to one woman." Since the scandal, Petronella has penned 4 books and writes regularly for the Sunday Telegraph, the Daily Mail and the Sun. She's also an acclaimed historian who's outspoken on the rise of cancel culture. So Petronella, it's so great to have you here. You're, of course, a very accomplished woman in your own right, but this is a story which just has so many parallels to what went on with Boris Johnson at the time that he was seeing you. Do you think that's why he didn't...
No, it doesn't. It has no parallels because as a journalist, our friendship began when he was simply a journalist. And remember, he was not in government. I don't think there are any parallels. Let's just take this away from me. Because I'm not on here to talk about my personal life. But I can tell you, my father was a Labour MP. I grew up with politics, politicians. I knew practically every cabinet member in the major government. I've known a lot of Labour politicians, many who've had affairs, for example, Robin Cook, you remember, John Prescott. I mean, it's not, sex and adultery is not confined to the Tories. Sex is not the province solely of Tories. But what I want to try and explain is why it happens. And I think one of the reasons why it happens is because when you go into politics, speaking from personal experience, having a father as a politician who was an MP and then a member of the House of Lords, it becomes your life. You don't see your family. You don't see your wife. And that bond of love and affection, unless you try terribly hard, and it was easier in the old days because when my father was in Parliament, the hours were easier and you could have second jobs. But nowadays, if you're an ambitious politician, basically you have to sacrifice your wife and your family. And in doing so, you're short of female companions. Surprising as it may seem, because most male politicians, especially these days, I know Errol Flynn's, their aides, and I've noticed this, regard stars. In the way a groupie would, you know, that is how it is. We look at Matt Hancock and we think, how could anybody? But that is not the case. So we've got two people who are essentially middle-aged. I mean, neither of them are classical beauties, Hancock or his girlfriend. That's not to denigrate her at all. It's just a fact. She's not a supermodel. She's not a 20-year-old supermodel. But together with a woman in a sort of in a sort of intimate situation, and you don't go home to your wife very much because your wife may be living in your constituency. This can often happen. What happened with John Major and Edwina Currie. This is what happened. I think this is what happened as well with Robin Cook. I think that his mistress was his secretary. Nigel
Clinton, of course.
Yes, Nigel Lawson left his wife for his secretary. This does happen a great. Another thing is that I think politicians are also isolated from real world. They're a bit like the royal family in the sense that when they've been in power for a certain number of years, they think they can get away with it.
And Sarah Vine wrote about this in such fascinating detail.
It's impossible not to be corrupted by power. And I've seen it happen time and time again to the nicest of people. Power changes them. Politics, they actually become better people. Because all political careers end in failure, and for some people it's a good thing because they kind of find the nice person who was once there. But it's certainly a sort of arrogance and an ivory tower sense that they're untouchable.
Well, that's what I actually meant when I was talking about the parallels, because Matt Hancock didn't believe that this was a resignation offence. He wanted to hang on. And I wonder if the reason that Boris Johnson didn't want to sack him, 2004 I think it was, when Michael Howard sacked Boris, he didn't think that he should have been said on the record, my personal life shouldn't come into politics.
Well, look, I wouldn't bring me into this because the most recent case has been Jennifer Currie.
Yes.
Yes, Boris can't sack someone for adultery because he'd have to sack himself. But I don't think that's the main reason. I think people are missing a trick here. I think the main reason he didn't want to sack Hancock was he wanted to use him as a human shield during the COVID inquiry. And this is what I hear time and time again from senior Tories. He also didn't want to sack Matt Hancock because he didn't want a role, which is pivotal at the moment, just before a by-election. There are many reasons why he didn't want to sack Matt Hancock. He also didn't want to sack Matt Hancock because if Boris decides something, it's over, you know, in his narrative, it's over. And I think he felt that the media were putting pressure on him, which is something he loathes, which is ironic given he was a journalist, but he now loathes the media and journalists. And it's like a kind of power play for him.
Yeah, because I wanted you to react to him today, because after so publicly standing by Matt Hancock on Friday, he did a 180. So look, I'll get you to react off the bat, but let's just have a look at how Boris almost tried to claim that he had sacked him today.
Well, I read the story on Friday, and we've got a new health secretary in post on Saturday, and I think that's about the right pace to proceed in a pandemic. And actually, I had a good conversation yesterday, a long meeting with Sajid Javid, the new health secretary.
And that was bizarre to me, because his official spokesman on Friday had said the case was closed.
Well,
he wasn't going to be sacked.
He's being typically Boris, and I mean, it's nonsense. And the other thing he did was, in replying to Hancock's letter of resignation, he stated publicly that he would be back. He would be brought back. Now, that is an impossibility. For one thing, the public are not going to forgive Hancock. And secondly, Hancock could not come back before any public inquiry. And as we know, as with the Iraq War inquiry, these things can last up to 2 years. So it's another, I mean, Boris keeps making these unforced errors. And had I been Boris, I want, not for the adultery, it's irrelevant. I mean, we're not some ridiculous puritanical country.
But it's the hypocrisy.
It's the breaking, exactly.
And he enforced them all of us.
It was for pretending he'd done nothing wrong when people, including myself, because I have a mother who has dementia in a care home, were not allowed to hug elderly or dying relatives. And that was disgusting. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. But I'm sure that Hancock is perfectly capable of initiating things himself. Yeah. But I have no idea, you know, who started what, only that it had been going on for much longer than people initially supposed.
Look, we've got so many questions pouring in for you, and they're much better than my questions, Petronella. So let's go straight to Rachel in Lincoln, who sent in a question to GB Views. And she said, what do you think of the Jennifer Arcuri episode? On a business level, how much did Jennifer's friendship with Boris help her get her business started?
Once again, it's very difficult to point a finger because it's very difficult to know what transpires in private between two people who are having a relationship. I mean, my relationships, not only with Boris, have often been misrepresented and lied about, and sometimes I didn't even recognise the stuff that's printed in the newspapers. But it is certainly true that and speaking from precedent, from history, going as far back to the 19th century, when Lord Melbourne was Prime Minister and he was having an affair with a married woman. He was the first British Prime Minister to be cited as co-respondent in a divorce case. But of course, if you're having an affair with a senior politician, natural affection is going to make him, you know, prefer you to other people. Yeah. That's human nature. I think you have to be very, very careful. But yes, I mean, for example, if it was a different profession, if we're talking about, say, a restaurant and the manager falls in love with the waiter, is he going to give her favourable treatment? Is he going to be more likely to promote her if she's vaguely competent? The answer is yes, of course. But when you get into matters of corruption, I don't like to pronounce because we don't know the details. So it's very difficult to say that he acted corruptly
No, indeed.
without evidence, and she's always denied it.
On that note, Tryman in Birmingham has sent in a question saying, should we not employ those with healthcare experience into the role of health secretary? So this is obviously partly to do with the fact that Hancock had, you know, an arts degree from Oxford, and then the woman who he hires to be essentially his chief aide, really, throughout this pandemic, who is now his lover, also had no obvious experience in terms of how to deal with a pandemic.
No, I think that's a little bit silly because you don't appoint a transport secretary because he's a good driver or tinkers around with cars. And a lot of good chancellors have not started out as professional economists. And home secretaries are not necessarily former QCs. And the really good scientists do not want to be in government, which is why I've always had an issue with SAGE, because every member of SAGE is a failed scientist. The good scientists, and I know good scientists, are making gazillions, you know, in the private sector.
Or they're inventing the vaccine.
Exactly. We've got a bunch of complete second-raters, one of who's a member of the British Communist Party, who have a kind of far-left, authoritarian political and economic agenda.
Totally.
So no, I don't think we should pull a doctor off the street and make him health secretary, because experience of government and running departments is more important.
Okay, next question from Chris, who has emailed GB Views, and Chris says, is the Prime Minister easily manipulated, and was he manipulated by Matt Hancock?
I don't think anyone could be manipulated by Matt Hancock. No, I don't believe that for a second. Poor Hancock's reminded me of Quivering Jelly. Do you remember that scene with him with the foot? He's terrified of a football. No, but as far as he's been manipulated, I wouldn't say that. He doesn't like making enemies. And
he's not good with confrontation. He's not good at sacking people.
Yes. And that gets him into trouble because you have to take very tough decisions as Prime Minister. He hates sacking people. He will sack them, but he won't tell them they're actually sacked. So he'll, you're doing really, really well. This is not a sacking, but... And so the person says, well, what are you trying to say? Well, you won't have that job description anymore, but you're doing so well. I mean, this is actually a promotion, and, well, what do you mean? But what about my salary? Well, you won't have a salary either, but this is much more prestigious, and you're going to have a glittering future. I mean, he promises, you know, he sugarcoats the pill too much, and he makes promises. I'm sure he told Hancock, you know, go. And they must have had a conversation. Okay, go, but you can come back. And that's where he makes a mistake. He makes promises he can't keep, and then he makes enemies, and people don't trust him and don't want to work with him. Which is why the Number 10 operation is like a playpen, because nobody of any calibre or competence wants to work there.
A question from Leslie. If a minister can betray his own family, how can we trust he won't betray his own country?
That's fascinating, because I remember John Redwood, the Tory cabinet minister, once said to me, a man who cheats on his wife cheats on his country. Now, I don't believe that for a second, because none of us, very few of us, are totally faithful to the same person over a period of decades. It's only human. For one, I'm not talking about a long affair, but a lapse. But it doesn't mean you're a traitor to your country. And funny enough, most traitors to their countries haven't been interested in women at all. They've traditionally been gay. So I honestly don't think... I know what you're trying to say.
Leslie, yeah.
I think if you're a serial liar, if you keep on doing it, then it is more likely you have no moral compass, and it's more likely you'll lie as a politician. But if it's one incident, one affair, I don't think you're necessarily a rotten politician.
Do we treat the woman unfairly in these situations, Petronella?
Yes.
You know, look at what Monica Lewinsky says about how her life has been ruined. I imagine it was really tough for you, and now Gina Collet-Angelo, are we treating her unfairly?
Yes.
Do we tend to blame the woman as a society rather than the
Yes,
bloke?
first of all, I hate the word mistress. I mean, it's so 18th century and it makes women sound like sluts.
Yeah, because you had a relationship.
Yes. What is a mistress? I don't know. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's so archaic. Madame de Pompadour was a royal mistress in the 18th century. What is a mistress? As you say, you have a relationship. I had a relationship. I wasn't a mistress.
And you were not in a relationship at the time. So you were not doing anything wrong in the same way that Monica Lewinsky was not doing anything wrong.
I was completely single. But I do think that women still are the victim of very harsh language. And you see this when you read an article about the Hancock business and you read the comments, the readers' comments, a lot of men will actually be saying, oh, well, good on Hancock for, you know, whatever, never mind, forget about social distancing. And there'll be many more comments saying, oh, how could she? He was married. How could she do it? She must be a complete slut or whore, whatever. No, I think there are still immense double standards when it comes to these things. And it's very hard on the woman.
No, and we should be conscious about
And
that
also,
when we're having
women
these
do not
conversations.
choose to fall in love with married men.
No.
You can't help who you fall in love with.
No, indeed. Well, look, do stand by, because we're going to have much more with Petronella Wyatt in just a few short minutes. We'll bring our panel in as well. Also coming up in Uncancelled with US journalist Barry Weiss, the future of the media from America via the UK to Hong Kong. Is this foreign regimes or cancel culture at home? Plus all of tomorrow's news tonight in Media Buzz 2, including the front pages as they drop. Do not go anywhere.
You know what they say, if you don't ask, you don't get. So go on Sky Q customers, pick up your Sky remote and say get Discovery Plus, and get 12 months of Discovery Plus at no extra cost. Get brand new, exclusive, can't see them anywhere else Discovery Plus originals, get unmissable, bingeable box sets, and get jaw-dropping real-life entertainment. But you don't get any hidden costs, and you don't get tied into a rolling contract. Get Discovery Plus for 12 months at no extra cost with Sky Q. Say get Discovery Plus into your voice remote or visit sky.com/Discovery Plus.
It's never been easier to turn your unwanted gold into instant cash with NM Money Gold. From necklaces to rings, whatever the gold, whatever the condition, we aim to have the best gold prices on the high street. Turn your gold into instant cash with NM Money Gold. Find one of our branches near you at nmgold.co.uk.
Oh.
Looking for something sporty, something family, or even something luxury? Why buy a brand new car when you can lease with Select Car Leasing? Choose any leading model and find your ideal car at a budget to suit you. Visit selectcarleasing.co.uk today.
This is Sophie. She has a meeting with her accountant this afternoon. Carl's VAT return is due. And Dave's just got his quarterly update. Get all relaxed about tax. Tax Assist accountants make things simple so you can focus on growing your business. Go online to find your local Tax Assist shop and switch today. Tax Assist Accountants, your trusted advisor on the high street.
Welcome back to the Media Buzz with all of the front pages on the way, plus Uncancelled with Barry Weiss. But first, we're back with acclaimed journalist and Boris Johnson's former girlfriend, Petronella Wyatt, in today's Big Question. And joining me in tonight's panel, chief reporter for the i-newspaper, Benjamin Butterworth, columnist for the Daily Express and political commentator Carol Malone, and GB News presenter Neil Oliver. Carol Malone, do you have a big question for Petronella?
I just want to react to something you said. You said, Petronella, that the adultery was irrelevant, that people turn a blind eye. I mean, I don't think you could be more wrong about that. First of all, because adultery goes right to the heart of the character of the person, I think. You know, the fact that he lies, the fact that he's a cheat, the fact that he can actually hurt the people he's supposed to love. So if he can do that at home, what can he do in politics? But you seem to suggest that people didn't care. I think people care hugely about that in this country, not least because never has there been a time in this government when the government has interfered in our private lives, and now that we're being told we shouldn't be interfering in his private life. What do you think? And then I want to come back to you about, you said something about that you can't blame the women in these affairs, that you had an affair with Boris, but he was married and you knew that, and yet you still had an affair with him. Why did you do that?
Which question?
Well, let's do the first one. Let's do the Boris thing first. About, you said Dan said to you that you weren't married, but you knew he was married, and you knew that by having an affair with him, that was going to
Yeah, but she wasn't doing anything wrong, Carol.
Well,
Boris
but
was
she
doing
was married.
I don't want to discuss something that's so personal. I'm sorry. But as I said, no one can help who they fall in love with, and...
Well, you can, I think, can't you?
Oh, no, you can't. No, this is not, no. There are occasions where it's a fling and where people can help themselves. There have been many married men. I have a rule. Since Boris, I've never even, gone out to dinner with a married man.
Okay.
Never did before that. But going back to your other... Somebody, do people care?
Yeah.
Well, if they cared, they wouldn't have voted for Boris. I think this
They certainly don't care when it comes to his...
I think people are very... I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I think people are very permissive and libertarian when it comes to sex life. And I think the issue with Matt Hancock was not adultery. It was the fact that he was telling everybody what to do with regard to social distancing, policing our lives, not allowing us, to hug relatives. And he was breaking his own laws. It was a them and us.
But there is that.
But the issue with Boris Johnson, though, and I actually give him credit for this, he has maintained an absolute solid position about his private life for 2 decades now, or over 2 decades. He will not discuss it. He will not be drawn on it. He will not speak to the media about it, and it's no one's business. And I actually think the public have given him a pass for that reason.
Can I just say another thing? Some of our greatest prime ministers have been adulterers. Disraeli was an adulterer. Palmerston was an adulterer. Melbourne was an adulterer.
But it's not a qualification. I mean, my point was that you say it doesn't matter. It may not matter in the elitist belt that is London and beyond. But I think it does matter to voters.
I'm talking about the country as a whole, because Palmerston, when they heard about Palmerston's mistress, for God's sake, don't tell the public, he'll sweep the country.
But it'll be interesting to see whether he retains the seat, because the people in his constituency are pretty upset and pretty disgusted by that.
How do you explain Boris Johnson's electoral success in that case?
And how do you explain the electoral success? Well, how do you explain people like Lloyd George? Even Churchill was...
You can't seriously be trying to persuade people that if you're an adulterer, you've got more chance of being elected, because I simply
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that people are prepared to overlook it. If they think the person is good for the country, they will overlook it.
Yeah. Benjamin, do you want to come in? Do you have a question for Petronella?
I do. For me, it's a question about whether you can trust them, because, you know, who a politician has sex with or who they date is their business. I've dated 2 MPs myself. It's no business of the public.
Hello, we need to know.
Well, but exactly, it's no business. So I know the pressures that some of them feel. But the question for me is that after a 4-year affair with Boris Johnson, you obviously knew that he was lying to his family and kids. Did you think
it wasn't 4 years.
Was it not?
And I actually left and went to live in America.
But my question, Petronella...
A lot of lies have been written about this. I actually left and I moved to America and I got engaged to an American.
Well, my question was, if he could lie to his wife and to his kids and to the public at the time, did you think that he could lie about just about anything if he could do that for so long?
No, because I have personal friends and relatives who have committed adultery, and some of them are amongst the kind of most decent, capable people I know. And I cannot bear morality. With morality, there is intolerance, hypocrisy. I've never met a moral man who had a good heart.
But you also said that it's about...
Never.
Petronella, you said it's about people...
I can't bear this kind of dreadful intolerance. If a man...
What, intolerance to cheats?
I don't know why it's called cheating.
Because it is cheating. He made vows to his wife.
But it's not considered that way in France or Italy.
But it is
why
here.
Is it only in England?
But it is here.
Answer that. Is there something... I think there's something unpleasant and vicious.
Yeah, there's something unpleasant for his wife.
Saxon, which is a kind of envy and jealousy for the person who they think is having the better time.
Oh, you're kidding. Look at Martha Hancock today. She is devastated. Her husband, she didn't know he was leaving her until Friday. She's been publicly humiliated. She's had to face the barrage of the press and questions. The woman's life has been disturbed beyond belief.
Of course it has, but marriages...
Not always in public, though.
No,
not in this way.
She is unlucky. I have great sympathy for that, because when it happens in public, it's terrible.
Yeah.
But what are we supposed to do? Tell me, if we said that...
Well, not say it doesn't matter, because it does. Not say it's fine, we've got to tolerate it, because no,
I'm not saying it's commendable. I'm simply saying that you cannot remove a very capable politician from a job merely because he's committed adultery. Okay, if he's serially unfaithful...
Like Boris Johnson.
Yes, like Boris Johnson.
And he lies in other aspects of his life.
Like Boris Johnson.
Then there is an argument, yes, there is an argument that Boris should not be Prime Minister because he has a tendency to lie in every area, including his professional life.
Well, I think it's down to the public, and the public have voted him overwhelmingly, and he's incredibly popular.
It is down to the public. It is true that it is strange that we have a Prime Minister who claims not to know how many children he has. That's a little unusual. But the public wanted him.
Yeah. Let's bring Neil Oliver up. Do you have a question for Petronella?
In the case of Matt Hancock, do you think it's something it's a common denominator of politicians that is it a self-destructiveness, or is it an arrogance, or is it just simple stupidity that leads so many of these men to take such chances at the most important times sometimes in their careers? You know, it seems to happen so many times, you know, right at a precise moment. Right. He took this chance and allowed this to happen. Is it arrogance, self-destructive, or is it just human fail?
I think a lot of politicians by nature gamblers, so they take risks that many of us wouldn't take. I mean, I think it was mad knowing there was cameras all over the building. They're on every government department to behave like that when he knows there are cameras about. But politicians have this weird adrenaline, and they also seem to think that they can get away with it. And you'd be surprised how many politicians do get away with it and how many times it does not make it into the newspapers.
Yeah, indeed, which is a terrifying thought.
Yes.
What a fascinating discussion, Petronella White. Just before you go, just want to quickly ask you about this big royal event on Thursday, the unveiling of Princess Diana. We'll see Prince William and Harry together for the first time in some time. You knew Princess Diana. She actually spoke to you previously about William and Harry. How sad are you that they're coming together at this really significant moment on her 60th birthday, worlds apart with their relationship at rock bottom?
I think it's very sad. I think it's very sad for the royal family as it is now, because I always believe in, let the dead bury the dead. And one has to look to the future, and I think it's very sad for the Queen. But I don't see how they can reconcile, because Harry is too much under his wife's thumb and her truth, which is a bit like Boris's truth in a way. I mean, it's bad because William is the future king, and it's very sad for the royal family as a whole, because Harry was very popular before he married and the trouble started. He was a great asset, and to see that go down the drain, and also to see him in California, where he can't possibly thrive and be a success because he's so thoroughly English and his tastes are English. He was in the army. He likes shooting things. He likes having a pint. He's in the most woke place in the world. I mean, he's not going to last there.
Fascinating stuff. Petronella White, thank you. You're absolutely amazing. Do come back soon. And to our panel, Neil Oliver, Carol Malone and Benjamin Butterworth, thank you too. They'll be back after the break. But coming up in Uncancelled at 11 o'clock, the New York Times writer who quit and caused an international sensation, Barry Weiss, on cancel culture and the state of journalism. Why is Twitter starting to edit our newspapers? And we'll have the stories making the headlines today and in tomorrow's front pages in the media buzz, including 250,000 children in England missed school last week, and most of them aren't even sick. Surely we can't continue to disrupt our kids' education like this. Should we be running our education COVID risk? We'll debate that in just a couple of minutes.
You want your car in good hands with expertise for spares, repairs and MOTs. You want your annual service ticked off. That's great. And in store, there's batteries fit while you wait. You've not far to go for a garage or store.
That's 750!
But wait, there's more. You want mobile experts to fit tires on your drive while you relax and...
Take 5.
For all your car needs and none of the fuss. You want Halfords, the name you can trust.
Say hello to the latest in flexible family holidays. The Ford Transit Custom Nugget offers compact dimensions with great possibilities. It's packed with innovative technology to give you everything you need. And whilst the space on the inside is amazing, wait until you see the space outside. Are you ready to escape to the wild? To start your journey, visit AM Philip Truck Tech, Scotland's Ford Transit Custom Nugget dealer.
From falling in love and finding a home, to spending your time making it your own. Perhaps it's just you and your four-legged friend, or maybe you have your savings to spend. A man about town with an apartment in mind, or simply looking for a bigger find. Find out how we can help you along life's journey. With access to all lenders, Flagstone can support you in getting the best mortgage deal to suit your personal needs. Why not give us a look at flagstone.co.uk? Your home may be repossessed if you do not keep up repayments on your mortgage.
When we all play the National Lottery a little, fun stuff happens. Like keeping our beaches clean and safe for everyone.
Past and the present and the future.
Bringing history to life.
The heart and the brain and the body.
Funding museums for all to enjoy. Supporting inspiring music programs and helping people explore the great outdoors. £30 million a week to good causes. The National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
Welcome back. The 250-year tradition of the circus was left hanging by a tightrope during the pandemic when the clowns in government failed to include circuses in its art rescue plan. Nearly 4,000 circus shows across the country were forced to cancel, and performers were left with no choice but to deliver a letter to Downing Street saying the circus had just 2 weeks before the end of the road if they weren't offered support. Fortunately, the government juggled its accounts and awarded £600,000 in grants so its performers could step back into the big top. And now, after months of being unable to perform, the circus has remarkably bounced back, and the trapeze artists, acrobats and clowns will be returning to their tents. One of the first circuses returning will be Cirque Berserk in the West End of London, with Martin Burton, the founder of Zippo Circus and Association of Circus Proprietors chairman, at the helm. But how has the circus survived the pandemic, and will they cope in the current regulations? Well, Martin Burton joins me now. Martin, this is great news. Did the government do enough to save the circus?
I believe they did, yeah. The circuses, tenting circuses are reopened all over the country. People are delighted to be able to get out of the house and go and see something in the outdoors. They feel safe and secure in the fresh air, and they're coming in large numbers to circuses all over Britain.
It's great. So can you return with full crowds yet?
No. So we're all playing to probably about 45% of our full capacity, which is a shame. What we're doing is we just put on more performances. So there's 3 shows every Saturday, 3 shows every Sunday. The circus artists all want to work. They all wanted to get back to work and do what they do best, and that's what we're doing.
Well, look, the circus will never die in my view, so that's great that you're back, Martin Burton. Congratulations so much. Thank you for joining me. And joining me in tonight's Media Buzz panel, the senior reporter for the iNewspaper, Benjamin Butterworth, the Daily Express and columnist, Carol Malone, and GB News presenter, Neil Oliver. Our first front pages are in now. Tomorrow's Daily Telegraph leading line, End Madness of Isolating Children. The new Children's Commissioner has called for bubbles and self-isolating at schools to be scrapped. Do we have a look at that front page? Can we bring it to you? We will look at this in just a moment. Very powerful front page, that. And it is madness, isolating children, and we will be talking about this later in the show. The Metro splashes with the headline, Now Boris Rewrites History. Fascinating, given our conversation with Petronella Wyatt, the Prime Minister suggesting that he actually sacked Matt Hancock from the role of Health Secretary, which we know he didn't do. And there is that front page. Also, there's a bit of a big game on tomorrow, if you're an England fan, at 5 p.m. Tomorrow's Yorkshire Post, though, let's have a look at that now. It splashes with the headline, Parliament security probe after Hancock CCTV leak. Security reviews have now been launched in Westminster into the leak of compromising footage of the former Health Secretary, Matt Hancock. But moving on, a huge fire broke out at Elephant and Castle tube station in London this afternoon. It really was shocking, the footage of this. Massive plumes of black smoke could be seen rising across the capital skyline. 10 fire engines and 100 firefighters were on scene to tackle the blaze. 6 people were treated at the scene by London Ambulance Services, and 1 of those people were taken to hospital. The Met Police, the good news is they say the incident is not terror-related, and the London Fire Brigade say 3 commercial units, 4 cars and a telephone box had caught fire, but it is unclear how the fire started. I mean, Benjamin's footage earlier today, of course, the first thought that you have is this terrorism? Thank God it wasn't, and thank God that there were no deaths.
Yeah, I mean, it was absolutely terrifying. The enormous plume of fire that came out in some people's videos on social media. But for me, you know, so often when these tragedies, these accidents, whatever's gone on here, there's always a hero in it. And Southwark Playhouse, which is a theatre around the corner from the train station where it happened, they invited people in who have been affected by this awful fire. They said if you need some water because of the smoke, if you need to charge your phone because it's died and you're stressed and worried about your friends or relatives. They invited people in, and I just thought that was so decent of them. They really deserve a shout out, and especially given what a tough time theatres have had, that they welcomed everyone in and helped them during this what must be an awful afternoon.
Indeed. Well, look, moving on, Joanna Williams has written in Spiked Online today that the school test has to go. 250,000 children in England missed school last week. That is 1 child in 10 out of class and stuck at home. And 7,000 schools shut down entirely, with hardly any are actually unwell. They have just come into contact with a child who has tested positive. It's clearly why the Daily Telegraph, if we can go back to that front page, are running this huge headline tomorrow, a campaign for our children saying, end the madness of isolating children. It is nuts.
This is completely nuts. This is playing politics with kids' lives, and we've seen it all throughout the pandemic. 1 in 10 kids aren't at school at the moment, which is mad. And we know that kids have not played a big part in spreading COVID. We know that they haven't played a big part in infecting, and kids were never seriously threatened by COVID. But it just seems to be that of all of those kids who were tested, only 9,000 tested, and it's incredible. 7,000 schools still shut at a time during this pandemic when numbers are going down. Hospital numbers are going down. It's kids have already lost 15 months of schooling. It seems appalling, and it just seems that they're protecting. These rules are protecting not kids, they're protecting teachers and unions, and that's what I mean about playing politics with people's lives. It just seems to me that the unions do not want the schools to operate normally again, and these regulations are preventing that from doing so. You don't have to be testing kids. If one kid in a bubble is found to be positive, all the kids in that bubble, which could be the entire school, are sent home, and they have to isolate for 10 days, which is madness. When is their education going to go back to normal?
And Neil Oliver, this is the point that you were making earlier in the show about testing, isn't it? Because when it's our kids being tested and potentially getting false positives, that sends home an entire classroom and forces these kids to stay locked in a house essentially for 10 days. This is becoming inhumane.
I think when we have time to look back at this, years in the future, this will have been one of the great public health scandals of our time. Children, by that I mean, anyone really under the age of, say, 18, let's say, they have borne the brunt of this. The impact on their lives, the impact on their education, the consequent compromising of their future, their relationships, their friendships, in the face of a disease that poses them a risk that is vanishingly rare. I cannot think that there has ever been a time when the well-being of children, the people coming forward, the next generation, has been so set aside to preserve the well-being of those older than them. The children, the generation that is youngest, that is coming forward, is the treasure of society. And what has been done to this generation of children, I think, is scandalous and unforgivable. Some of it will not be, we can't fix it. Some of the damage that has been done will not be and cannot be fixed. And we will look back on this time in years ahead, and we will hang our heads in shame at what's been done to the children.
Agree? Why?
I mean, look, the fact that 250,000 have been off and there are 9,000 who've tested positive, clearly that seems a bit extreme, and I'd ask whether those bubbles could be smaller. I heard on a show today that these bubbles are as much as 60 or 90 classmates, OK? They're not even in the same class, they're in the same year group. That doesn't seem practical. But look, the fact that only 9,000 of them tested positive is a good thing. If they weren't isolating, then it would have been far more than 9,000. And I dare say that one of the answers to this, especially given the kids that are doing their A-levels, so the stuff that seriously impacts the rest of their life and their university opportunities, well, this is why it's so important that they're offered the COVID vaccine to dramatically reduce the chances of passing it on to other people later this year. And I'm afraid that I find lots of these people that say we shouldn't close the schools or isolate these individual pupils who get sick or near people who get sick seem to also oppose vaccinating the teenagers.
But then even kids with no trace of the virus whatsoever still have to isolate days. You're disrupting the schooling of perfectly healthy children. And more importantly, parents are having to take time off work. They're losing money. It's disrupting family lives. It's not just disrupting their school lives, it's disrupting their home lives as well.
It is. And actually, I think a better answer to this would be if we did what they did with Michael Gove when he got back from that football match in Portugal. He was tested, I think, every day with PCR and lateral flow tests to find out if he had COVID.
So but you've got to traumatise our kids for sticking our cotton bud up until their brain every day.
I mean, if
they're
traumatised by that, Dan, then we really do have a generation of snowflakes. I'm sure they'll be fine, and I think testing is the answer to this.
Look, Australia, I spoke about it earlier in my digest, and I just want to come back to the story. They were hailed for its closed borders policy and zero virus approach that let people live a normal life. But it's crumbling. If you look at this map, cities around Australia now in lockdown as the Indian variant is spreading through the population, of which only 5% is vaccinated. 18 million Australians, that's about 70% of the population, are in lockdown, and the Prime Minister Scott Morrison announced all care home workers must have a vaccine. So, Neil, to me, what's happened in Australia makes a complete mockery of a zero COVID policy. Australia thinks that it has freedom. It doesn't even have anything approaching freedom because there's no immunity in the population. There's lots of vaccine hesitancy. The vaccine rollout has been a joke. Right now, Scott Morrison isn't even prepared to commit to opening the borders to Australia by December 2022.
God. This is hubris. COVID-19 is with us. It's a virus. It will not be going anywhere. It will come and it will go as flu does, as any number of other viruses do. What Australia has attempted to do was always doomed to failure. You'd have to lock a country down, lock a continent down, and keep it locked down forever. And even at that, there's no way to keep a virus out of a continent. It's going to get in. And it's yet another glaringly...
In the world, and it's got in. It's got in. Everyone, even their own citizens coming in from India, it's got in.
Yeah, what's been glaringly